Chapter 11:26. The golden star on the horizon lit up before turning into a golden streak that tore through the sky. What's that? It's so fast. The unraging monk and the dauntless monk were surprised. They had never seen such a swift streak of light in their lives. What was even stranger was that the golden light was vaguely similar to the Buddhist light. Had other Buddhist cultivators come to reinforce them? In the next moment, they also heard cicadas. They looked at one another. Don't tell me, the golden cicada spirit king. The first to mention this name was actually the war demon Hun, which demonstrated just how deep his understanding of the 9 provinces was. His expression was rather stern, but he said in disdain, "What a joke. Do you really think you can turn defeat into victory just by being a mere demon king? You'll know once you try," Li Qingshan said. The golden light paused and stopped above Great Buddha Mountain. The golden eyes gazed down at the mountain, but they did not spread their wings or fly into the sky. Only the cicadas' cries grew louder and louder, almost shrill. The war demon's roar suddenly stopped. The cicada's cries seemed tangible, pouring into his mouth and blocking all other sounds. His body glowed with golden light. The bell immediately grew clear again. For a moment, the demonic army fell into chaos. They began killing one another again. Blood flowed like rivers, raining down from the sky. The gigantic war demon shuddered and immediately blurred, collapsing even faster within the cicada's cries. "Attack! Anyone who hesitates will be executed without mercy," the war demon Hun ordered. The demon kings ignored the power of the laws of the world and charged towards the Green Province cauldron as hard as they could despite the lightning, thunder, hail, and rain. The Green Province cauldron became more and more contaminated by the demon chi. It could no longer suppress the surging demon chi anymore. Instead, it was pushed upwards. Even Chu Lai King could not hold on any longer. There was a flash of golden light. A handsome, young monk descended from above, standing on the Green Province cauldron. His kasaya fluttered in the wind, giving off an air of nobility that surpassed the Green Province. He brought his palms together and chanted, "Amitabha." His clear voice turned into a ring of golden light and swept out. The dozen or so demon kings were all sent flying, even suppressing the demon chi's contamination. The cicada's cries never stopped. The war demon Hun also charged over with the other demon kings, his horse galloping. Unstoppable. Li Qingshan stood with his saber horizontally. He could not let them step into the illusion of Qingju. Although the golden cicada spirit king's current realm was high, he had already consumed a lot of power when he was going through the tribulation just now. It was impossible for him to compete with so many demon kings in terms of energy consumption. Suddenly, a black figure floated beside him and formed a human figure. He stood beside Li Qingshan with his sword in hand. Li Qingshan gave him a sidelong glance. "Are you all right?" He didn't expect the Dragon King of the Sea to answer, but to his surprise, the Dragon King of the Sea said, "Very well." "That's good." Li Qingshan laughed. The 2 demon monarchs raised their sabers and swords at the same time, facing the demons. Earth force field. Li Qingshan's eyes were bright and dark, with himself as the center. The surrounding force field kept changing, contracting, and expanding, causing the demon kings to move forward and backward involuntarily. Although they couldn't focus their power on a single demon king to completely control their movements, they were able to instantly tear apart the encirclement. This caused a subtle time difference in the joint attack. The fastest was still Battle Devil Hun. His legs had already disappeared. He faintly merged with the demon horse beneath him. Man and horse as one, he slashed with his sword. Die. At this moment, if Li Qingshan gave up on controlling the force field and allowed the demon kings to display their advantage in numbers, victory would be decided in an instant. But if he didn't care about it, the power of this sword would definitely not be able to withstand it head-on. The black shadow floated over. Mo Wuhan turned his body and waved his sword to meet the Battle Devil Hun. That 3 feet green sword seemed so weak compared to the huge sword, but at the moment when the 2 swords collided, the black color spread out, following the huge sword to the Battle Devil Hun, pulling him into the painting. This was the Dragon King of the Sea's ultimate skill, Thousand Autumns painting. The reaction of the demon kings was also extremely fast. At the moment when they were disturbed by the Earth's force field, they displayed their strongest ultimate skills. Hundreds of eyes split open on their bodies, or condensed dark purple light balls between the 3 sharp horns on the top of their heads, and so on. The terrifying demonic light that was enough to destroy a mountain pounced over like a landslide or a tsunami. The Dragon King of the Sea dragged Battle Devil Hun into the painting. Although he had the absolute advantage, he couldn't move freely anymore. And even if he could move, the Qingju Cauldron couldn't. Chu Lai King had obviously reached his limit. Little and focused on activating the Chaos Soul Bell, while the Golden Cicada Spirit King used the cicada's chirping to suppress the Battle Devil Hun while dealing with more than 10 Demon Kings. It was already very difficult. If there were more than 10 Demon Kings, the illusion of Qingju would definitely be broken. After the Demon Kings were demonized, although they didn't look like humans and looked more like demons, but in terms of scheming and craftiness, they were even stronger than ordinary human cultivators. This joint attack was determined to succeed. If anyone dared to block it, they would be annihilated in the face of this overwhelming power, regardless of whether they had bones of steel or a painting of 1,000 years. The Earth's force field had a strong effect on any physical object. However, the effect was not so obvious on light waves and airflow. However, Li Qingshan had always been very comprehensive. He stood guard in front of the illusion of the Green Province without taking a single step back. His eyes suddenly became calm, as deep as the ocean. The terrifying demonic light was reflected in them. He spread his arms, and a smooth mirror surface unfurled before him. Last radiance of the setting sun. However, the terrifying demonic light bombarded the mirror, causing it to distort and cave in. It couldn't withstand such a fierce attack and started to crack. Li Qingshan frowned and struck out with his palm. Return. Boom. With a loud bang, the mirror shattered and the demonic light exploded. The airwave swept out for thousands of miles and cleared the heaven and earth. The surging demon chi was suppressed, and most of the mountain peak of Great Buddha Mountain was devoured by the demonic light. The Green Province Cauldron was knocked high into the air by the shockwave. At least it was not directly attacked, so the illusion of the Green Province could be maintained. The painting shattered, and the war demon broke free. His body had already completely merged with the war horse. He swung his sword and charged over without the slightest hesitation. Half of Li Qingshan's bones were exposed. He swung his blade and cut through the demonic light. Again, the cries of cicadas, the chimes of bells, battle cries, roars. All sorts of sounds gathered together and merged together, shaking up the surrounding. Buddhist light, demon chi, blade aura, sword light. All sorts of colors crisscrossed, flickering as they collided and dissolve. This was the collision of 2 worlds, but under the swaying of the chaotic soul bell, the demon folk army was on the brink of collapse very soon. The chaotic soul bell was originally more suited for dealing with ghouls. They were either walking corpses or possessed no bodies, so it was easy for them to fall into chaos. If it were used against regular cultivators, the effects would be drastically reduced. However, the twisted and absurd way of thinking that demon folk were born with made their very nature twisted and chaotic, which was why they were able to achieve something like this. Little Un tried fusing the Buddhist supreme technique, the chant of Deva Nga, into the chimes to further restrain himself. The first to collapse was the war demon over 3,000 meters tall. As the demon folk army descended into a chaotic battle, it was no longer able to maintain its body, collapsing into surging demon chi. The cries of cicadas suddenly became louder and louder. A strand of coiling golden light seeped out of the surging demon chi like a soaring dragon or snake. It turned into over a dozen strands of golden light and pierced through the demons. Even the demon kings could not respond in time. They all shuddered and were immobilized. Chapter 11:27. How could Li Qingshan let go of such a good opportunity? The tiger stripes on his face spread and formed a king character on his forehead. His hostility soared to the sky as he performed the tiger demon's fury. At the same time, he was still in the state of battle demon's possession and fanatic's end. Break. The demon fighter flew out with a look of disbelief as if he had been punched in the face. In a trance, Li Qingshan's figure disappeared and turned into a tiger demon with a blade in its mouth. He drew a red light and in the next moment, he returned to his human form. He had already retracted his magical power. His bones were full of cracks and his body was on the verge of collapse. He turned back and grinned, "You've lost." Several demon kings were crushed and killed in one move. No. The demon fighter roared. They had such a great advantage, how could they lose to a few people? However, in the cultivation world, all power belonged to the individual. Quantity had never been able to compete with quality. Li Qingshan ignored the demon fighter's wails and said to Jiyu Yangying in the distance, "Are you here to watch the show? Seeing that you guys are united and can cut through metal, I thought I didn't need to do anything. But all right." Jiyu Yangying rushed to Great Buddha Mountain and had been standing far away. Seeing the Dragon King of the Sea and Li Qingshan joining forces to fight against the enemy, she couldn't help but sigh and feel gratified. At this moment, he opened his jade folding fan and waved it from top to bottom, attracting the astral wind from outer space. Then, he waved it from bottom to top, raising the hot wind of hell and blowing it towards the group of demons. The golden cicada spirit king stood on the Qingju cauldron with no sadness or joy on his face. The invisible sound was like a golden light shuttling back and forth. Wherever it went, the demon kings trembled. Only a powerful battle demon like the demon fighter could barely resist the invasion of the cicada's sound. The wind whistled and the cicada's loud and clear sound. The situation was gradually reversed. Li Qingshan felt the blazing phoenix fire in his heart rapidly healing the injuries on his body. If it was in the past, he could barely make one move by activating the state of triple burst. His body would immediately collapse. However, the fact that he was able to withdraw from this state after such a long and arduous battle was a testament to his strength. His Phoenix Nirvana Sutra was only a hair's breadth away from the 5th level. Once he broke through to the 5th stage of the Phoenix Nirvana Sutra, not only would he have another chance to use the Phoenix's Nirvana Sutra, but he would also be able to hold on for a while longer. Instead, he had completely balanced his 4 heavenly fiend god transformation, and his strength would reach a whole new realm. This battle was the key to breaking through. Unknowingly, the ringing gradually faded away. Almost all of the devil army had fallen into a frenzy. More than half of them were dead or injured, and the rest were still killing each other fiercely. Rivers of blood flowed everywhere. If there was no external intervention, it would be impossible for them to regain their consciousness. Little and heaved a sigh of relief and put away the Chaos Soul Bell. With a wave of his left hand, the skull prayer beads spun and formed the skeleton fiend formation, surrounding the Qingju cauldron. They blocked the attacks of the demon kings and resisted the invasion of the demonic qi, protecting the tottering Qingju cauldron. With a wave of his right hand, a river of blood surged out from the Blood Sea banner. It hung upside down and sucked the million demon folk into it. First, it used the dead to fuel the water before devouring the living, growing larger and larger. In the blink of an eye, the river of blood expanded by 100 times, surging like a dragon of blood. Even the demon generals and demon commanders could not escape the fate of being devoured. Then, it soared back and coiled around the Green Ruins illusory realm, protecting the Green Province cauldron like a fortress. Little and wrapped his hands around the air and slowly coiled them. The endless sea of blood and the skeleton fiend formation clashed. Only now did the demon kings attacking the Qingju cauldron realize the situation. They wanted to charge out, but they discovered that the sky was filled with the color of blood and fire. The devil army of 1,000,000 was stripped of their flesh and blood in the sea of blood, reduced to skeletons. With a series of whooshing sounds, the skull prayer beads surged towards them. The skull prayer beads would turn into skeleton fiends from time to time, cackling as they lunged towards them. This sight was basically like the cycle of reincarnation in hell. It left the demon kings pale in shock. Chu Lai King gazed at Little An's back. The Blood Sea banner ruffled, the white monk's robes billowed, and her long hair drifted in the wind. Her figure was not particularly large, but it possessed the supreme dignity of ruling over everything. Suddenly, he felt like it was unreal. "This is my daughter." A strange light flashed through the golden cicada spirit king's eyes too. He doubted whether he had made the right decision in luring her to the Chan monastery of Nga. However, he immediately dismissed this thought. He could sense that the Buddhist nature she possessed was not fake. The dauntless monk and the unraging monk watched this unfold. They had no idea what to say. The effects of the bell were powerful, but it was still invisible after all. It did not possess such a great impact. Was this the power of the enemy of Buddha? Senior brother, this enemy of Buddha is probably not something we can deal with, but looking at her words and actions, she doesn't seem like the enemy of Buddha. The unraging monk deliberated over his words. He was open-minded and unconstrained. He would not simply treat her as the enemy of Buddha just because of the path of white bone and great beauty. Whether she's the enemy of Buddha or not has nothing to do with us anymore. Even if the imperial advisor of the left comes in person, what can we do? The dauntless monk shook his head helplessly. Coupled with the extremely vicious Li Qingshan, who could still deal with her? Who would still be bold enough to deal with her? Buddhism was particular about fearless sacrifice, but that was not just throwing away one's life for nothing. And, just like what the unraging monk had said, she was not like the soaring locust king, massacring the masses and massacring them. In the blink of an eye, the tables were turned. The demon kings were cut down one by one, turning into a part of the boundless sea of blood. Little Anne gave up on her control over the skull prayer beads, allowing them to attack freely as skeleton fiends. She gripped the blood sea banner with both hands and leapt up, swinging it hard. A fan-shaped streak of blood-red light swept through the sky, and the two demon kings vanished. The blood sea banner danced about in her hand. Streaks of blood-red light swept through the sky, and the demon kings fell into the blood sea banner one by one, struggling and tossing about in the blood sea banner. The sticky blood stuck to their bodies firmly, spreading throughout their entire bodies. If they wanted to break free, they would have to contend against the entire sea of blood. Skeletons of various sizes crawled all over their colossal bodies after demonification, nibbling away at them bit by bit like ants swallowing elephants. The blood sea banner's effects had always been extremely limited. Although it could create a space of its own, the first thing she needed to do after obtaining resources was to increase her cultivation, then refine the Buddha slaying sword, and then the skull prayer beads. The resources given to the blood sea banner were negligible, so it was unable to unleash much of its effects. However, after devouring an army of 1,000,000 demons, the blood sea banner's power reached an unprecedented level. It demonstrated the terrifying might of the boundless sea of blood, the shore of which there is no turning back. Under the support of the Golden Cicada Spirit King and Jiyu Yangying, Li Qingshan and the Dragon King of the Sea had slain over a dozen demon kings consecutively. The war devil Hun had basically become all alone, no longer as mighty as when he first arrived. Right now, whether or not he could break free had even become a problem. Why is it like this? The war devil Hun was filled with reluctance. At this moment, a voice suddenly rang out in his ear. Do you want to win? Who are you? Come, refine me. Kill them all. A strange, twisted sword shot out of thin air, appearing before the war devil Hun. He grabbed the hilt instinctively. Chapter 1128. Oh no. Li Qingshan's eyes narrowed. Originally, he thought the forsaken immortal sword had probably fled to the demon domain after not appearing for so long, but he never expected it to still appear, and at the most critical moment. Chu Lai King and the others who had witnessed the forsaken immortal sword's power all shuddered inside. They experienced an ominous feeling as if a great disaster was about to befall them. In the cultivation community, absolute disparities in strength were often not something numbers could make up for. For example, an army of 1,000,000 demon folk was nothing before little Anne. The forsaken immortal sword's own strength had already surpassed Li Qingshan and the others. If the battle demon Hun was added to the mix, it would probably reach an unimaginable level. Stop him. Li Qingshan lunged over, and little Anne followed from the left and right. The terminal wildflower blade and the Buddha slaying sword slashed down at the same time. The edges of the blades revolved with black shockwaves, and the edges shone with golden light. Either one of them could easily kill a demon king. Come, refine me. You'll possess unprecedented power. The forsaken immortal sword's enticing voice echoed through the battle demon Hun's head. The reason why it hadn't made a move and had endured until now was because as a sword, even if it possessed extraordinary strength, it had to bear the innate shackles. It had to be wielded by someone. Regardless of whether it was the sword master or the sword slave, there had to be someone to hold the hilt of the sword. With its own strength, it could reign supreme for a time, but it could not sustain a prolonged battle. Just now, after destroying the demon suppression tower, it had basically used up all the power it had obtained from Elder Tien. If it struck out recklessly, it would be in danger of being captured, which was why it had hidden itself in the demon cavern. It was waiting for an opportunity. Now, the opportunity had finally arrived. "You want me to be your sword slave?" The battle demon Hun was filled with caution. He could sense the abnormality of the sword in his hand. It was definitely not a weapon that a demon king could casually wield. "No, no, no. It's just a partnership. If we work together, killing all of these people is nothing difficult. Or do you want to die here for nothing? Do you want to become a great joke, a pitiful failure?" The forsaken immortal sword soul spared no effort in persuading him. It was filled with urgent desire. This fighting devil mix was simply the best choice. His strength was more than a level higher than Elder Tien's, and he could unleash even more of its power. At the same time, he did not have the ability to become the swordmaster, so he could find an opportunity to turn him into a sword slave during the intense battle. It was not a difficult task. If it was a normal day, no matter what, Battle Devil Hun would not easily refine the abandoned immortal sword. In other words, no demon king would take such a risk. Even if they wanted to refine it, they would have to be fully prepared. No one was willing to become a sword slave and end up being devoured by the sword. However, in the current situation, there was no time for hesitation. The communication was completed in the blink of an eye. As the sword and saber slashed down, he said decisively, "All right." He tossed aside the large sword in his hand, which turned to dust in midair. He gripped the abandoned immortal sword tightly with both hands, and it suddenly gave off a dazzling demonic light. Boom! The terminus frenzied flower blade and the Buddha slaying sword slashed at the demonic light at the same time. The demonic light suddenly transformed into a sword light that expanded and contracted indefinitely. It was actually able to resist the sharp edge of the blades. It was the forsaken immortal sword light. "Hehe, your time of death has come." The voices of Battle Devil Hun and the forsaken immortal sword soul overlapped, and the surrounding void distorted and collapsed. Countless tiny cracks appeared. Li Qingshan's expression became increasingly solemn. This meant that Battle Devil Hun's power had already surpassed the limits of what this world could contain. If it were not for the fact that they were above the demon's lair, it would definitely have caused a huge change in the weather. He had only seen such a scene when Cheong-Chi had descended. Little and waved the blood sea banner, sweeping them into the sea of blood. The boundless sea of blood surged, and layers of it piled up to form a semisphere that enveloped them in the center. Countless skeletons surged forward, but before they could even approach, they were shattered by the expanding and contracting sword light. Little and did not expect the blood sea banner to be able to deal with Battle Devil Hun. He only hoped that it could slightly delay Battle Devil Hun from refining the abandoned immortal sword. "How is it?" Li Qingshan asked. "It's no good. The blood sea banner can't trap him, and we can't stop him from refining the sword. It won't take long." Before Little and had even finished speaking, the blood sea banner erupted with streaks of light. The sea of blood exploded loudly, and a streak of light rushed out in an unstoppable manner. Once Battle Devil Hun broke free, cutting through the illusion of the green province that was on the brink of collapse would be a piece of cake. Even the Golden Cicada Spirit King would not be able to stop him. Once the illusion of the green province was broken, the demon's lair would no longer be suppressed. Very soon, the region of 500 kilometers would be reduced to demonic soil. Let alone defeating Battle Devil Hun, even breaking free would be difficult. As for the Dragon King of the Sea, Li Qingshan, Little Anne, and the Golden Cicada Spirit King, they were still fine. They all had their own methods to protect themselves, but Chu Lai King, the Dauntless Monk, the Unraging Monk, and Jiyu Yangying would probably die here. Even the monks of the monastery who had yet to make it too far away, or even all the living creatures within a range of 500 kilometers, would fall into the demon's claws. Were the humans and diamonds of the Green Province still unable to stop the invasion of the demon domain after a bitter battle? If we want to break free, we have to do it now. It'll be too late if we hesitate any longer, said Little Ann. Everyone, please back away. I'll deal with him, said the Golden Cicada Spirit King. Fellow Golden Cicada probably isn't this demon's opponent. Li Qingshan was still being polite when he said that. The Golden Cicada Spirit King had just failed his tribulation in the first place. First, the soaring Locust King's claw pierced his heart, and then he went through a great battle. At the same time, he had to help Chu Lai King suppress the demon chi. He had already reached his limits. It was impossible for him to be Battle Devil Hun and the immortal Forsaken Sword's opponent. There's always a way. The Golden Cicada Spirit King's handsome face was indifferent. Though, we'll probably have to destroy fellow Little Ann's arcane treasure. Don't tell me you're thinking of. Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. The Golden Cicada Spirit King was clearly determined to die, wanting to drag the Battle Devil Hun down with him. Perhaps he had already made up his mind before coming here. Was he going to sacrifice himself for his cause and save the world, or was he going to give an explanation to the soaring Locust King? Perhaps it was both. Looking around, the situation on their side was not optimistic. There was no need to mention Chu Lai King and the others. Though the Dragon King of the Sea had an undying body, his power was also extremely weak. Little Ann, on the other hand, had conserved most of his power. He was even stronger than when he had first arrived, but it was difficult for him to fight against an opponent whose power far surpassed his. Especially after the Battle Devil Hun had refined the immortal Forsaken Sword, his swordsmanship was so strong that it was impossible for him to be struck by the Buddha-slaying sword. Perhaps only he, who had the last frenzied flower saber, could compete with him. Seeing the sword light in the Blood Sea banner getting brighter and brighter, this might be the only way. The Golden Cicada Spirit King walked towards the Sea of Blood. There was no fear of death on his face. There was not even the solemnity of sacrifice. Instead, there was a hint of relief. Wait. A tall figure stopped the Golden Cicada Spirit King. Li Qingshan said, "Fellow Daoist, you've cultivated so hard. How can you give it up so easily? Everyone, think of a way to suppress the demon's den. I'll be back soon." Saying so, he stepped into the Sea of Blood, facing the Battle Devil Hun and the immortal Forsaken Sword. Chapter 1129. Fellow Qingshan. The Golden Cicada Spirit King was mildly surprised. Chu Lai King and the others were stunned as well. Li Qingshan was all alone, so how could he contend against the battle demon spirit that had refined the Forsaken Immortal Sword? Or perhaps, not a single person or demon here could do that. That was basically no different from committing suicide. He has his own confidence. Little Ann said, but she seemed more like she was comforting herself. There was probably no one in the world who worried about Li Qingshan more than her, but there was also no one who trusted Li Qingshan more than her. She sucked in a gentle breath. Everyone, please suppress the demon cavern quickly. The unraging monk was the first to step forward. He used the demon suppression statuary and lifted a demon suppression tower high into the air. It grew larger and larger until it became like a small mountain, hurling it towards the demon cavern desperately. Stimulated by the demon chi, the demon suppression tower doubled in size again, crushing down viciously. However, compared to the colossal demon cavern, it still seemed much smaller. The Golden Cicada Spirit King brought his palms together and unfurled his cicada wings. He trembled like a golden mist, and the chirping of cicadas rang out once more, spreading out like it was tangible. The dauntless monk, Jiyu Yangying, and even Jin Fugue, Yu Wuyang, and the others who had arrived afterwards exerted their strength together, powering the black sand and atmospheric winds to suppress the churning demon chi. Chu Lai King ingested a pill and slowly pushed the Green Province cavern down. But at this moment, the demon chi suddenly surged even more violently, lifting up the Green Province cavern instead. Clearly, a powerful demon folk had taken action in the demon chi on the other side of the demon cavern. Afterwards, battle cries rang out in the demon cavern again. Everyone's expressions changed. Only then did they remember that the army of the demon domain they had annihilated with everything they had was only the vanguard. Now, everyone was utterly exhausted. Even the Green Province cavern was on the verge of collapse from the demon chi. They could not help but feel a hint of despair. How were they supposed to stop them this time? Little Anne sucked in a deep breath and said loudly, "Your Majesty, you've watched the battle for so long. Can you show yourself?" Chu Lai King's heart shivered. He followed Little Anne's gaze. At the far end of the world, there was a floating mountain of clouds. Following Little Anne's voice, the mountain of clouds gradually dispersed, leaving nothing behind. However, the rainbow light in the air quickly twisted and trembled, revealing a shimmering silver dragon king. It was heading straight for Great Buddha Mountain. Everyone was above the demon cavern, where the two worlds intersected. Their senses were heavily affected, and they were focused on fending off the demon folk, so none of them actually sensed it. Chu Lai King felt bitter in his heart. This was really a case of when it rains, it pours. The Green Province was plagued with so many disasters. The long-awaited reinforcements from the Dragon Province never came. Instead, their mortal enemies came. The Silver Dragon King approached, and the King of Southern Yu announced loudly, "Chu Lai King, the Chu Empire's end has arrived." The expressions of the dauntless monk, Yu Wuyang, Jin Fugue, and so on changed too. "Your Majesty, assist me in suppressing the demon cavern." Little Anne did not seem to hear the King of Southern Yu's declaration of war. "What did you say?" The King of Southern Yu was taken aback, but he was also amused. "Fellow Little Anne, didn't you hear me? I've come to destroy the Chu Empire. Even if I've helped you just now, don't push your luck." If it were not for the fact that he was hiding in the Cloud Mountains and saw the terrifying might of Little Anne's attacks, he would have directly attacked her and shown her his determination to destroy the Chu Empire. He waved his hand. "Since you've already converted to Buddhism, this has nothing to do with you. You better back off to one side. Father, please pass on the throne to me. Please pass the throne to me." Xiaoan turned to fierce King Chu and said, "All right." Chu Lai King did not hesitate at all. Right now, the only person who could save the Chu Empire was his daughter. As long as he could protect the legacy of his ancestors, it did not matter whether she was the enemy of Buddha or the child of Buddha. From today onwards, Princess Dark Moon shall inherit the position of King Chu. She shall be known as the Dark King of Chu. Dark King of Chu. Little Anne murmured before saying to the King of Southern Yu, "It has something to do with me now. You're forcing my hand." The King of Southern Yu frowned. "Have you come this time to take over the Green Province, Your Majesty?" Little Anne asked. The King of Southern Yu sank into thought. No. The Green Province was much smaller than the Mist Province. Its resources were not as plentiful as the Mist Province either. Even its greatest advantage, its population, had declined drastically after the disaster. However, before this, the King of Southern Yu was still very interested in ruling over the Green Province. Not only was this the ambition of the previous kings, but the population only needed a century to recover. However, after witnessing the sights of the Myriad Ghosts Abyss and Great Buddha Mountain, he had already completely changed his mind. He had to fend off the attacks of the Hungry Ghost Realm and the Demon Domain at the same time. Only a complete idiot would be interested in ruling over the Green Province. "Then you've come to destroy the Chu Empire?" Little Anne asked again. "Exactly," said the King of Southern Yu. He had come all the way here not to destroy the Chu Empire. Was he here for a holiday? "All right, then in the name of the King of Chu, I declare that from today onwards, the Chu Empire no longer exists." "It has officially been destroyed," said Little Anne. Let alone the King of Southern Yu, even Chu Lai King was stunned. The Chu Empire that had existed for tens of thousands of years had actually been destroyed in the time it took to utter a single sentence. What do you mean by that?" the King of Southern Yu asked. "All right, you've already destroyed the Chu Empire. Are you satisfied with this result? Or are you saying you're determined to pull up the weeds by the roots, even killing me, the ruler of a destroyed empire?" Little Anne said. The King of Southern Yu smiled bitterly. "You should know that I've never wanted to become enemies with you and Qing Shan." "I don't agree," Chu Lai King said furiously. The Green Province cauldron trembled. "King of Southern Yu, if you want to destroy my Chu Empire, then let's perish together." It's not like my Yu kingdom will be the first to suffer anyway. The king of southern Yu obviously would not be threatened like that. Just as they were about to draw their swords, Little An called out, "All of you, shut your mouth." Her furious call that contained the chant of Nga rang out like a great bell, deafening even the deaf. "You two short-sighted fellows. You call yourselves kings in vain. What are you fighting over in the land of the snail's horn? The demon domain and the hungry ghost realm have invaded at the same time. The 9 provinces are on the verge of destruction. Do you want to become ghouls or demon folk?" Little An had always been quiet and ethereal. Apart from Li Qingshan, no one had ever seen her angered before. Now that she was furious, the world fell silent. "Well said," the golden cicada spirit king praised. "Please reconsider, fellow cultivators." "Fine then. You're the king of Chu after all." Chu Lai King was helpless. He calmed down his anger and also thought it through. The kingdom of Chu was just a name at the end of the day. As long as the Ji clan was preserved, couldn't they restore the kingdom? The king of southern Yu also considered Little An's words. Neither the hungry ghost realm nor the demon domain were easy to deal with. When demons and ghouls ran amok, even if the Mist province wanted to remain safe, it would be impossible. "Fine then. I've come to help you suppress the demon cavern." "I'm just helping you. Thank you, Your Majesty." Little An bowed and thought to herself, learning how Qingshan speaks from time to time seems to be quite useful. She was not actually angry. She was already prepared to leave. Although she was merciful and wanted to suppress the demon cavern and save countless lives, even if the entire 9 provinces were added together, they were not as important as Li Qingshan alone. Chapter 1130. As soon as Li Qingshan stepped into the sea of blood, flashes of light filled his vision. He instinctively crossed his arms in front of his chest, and stabbing pain followed closely. The edge of the sword pierced his arms, and the tip plunged into his chest. His skin turned light green, and the muscles on his arms bulged. He used the strength of the ox demon to block the sword light. "You dare to come and die?" Battle Devil Hun and the abandoned celestial sword's voice overlapped, their eyes filled with killing intent. Li Qingshan looked at them calmly. "Even if you become a slave and lose your sense of self, do you still have to win?" Battle Devil Hun's heart trembled. His compatibility with the abandoned celestial sword was disrupted. No one would be willing to become a slave, let alone a sword. "Shut up." The sword pierced deeply into Li Qingshan's body. Even the ox demon forges its skin couldn't block it, and cracks appeared on it. "As an enemy, you are not worthy of my respect." Li Qingshan grinned, full of contempt. "Die." Battle Devil Hun roared, pushing Li Qingshan forward. The abandoned celestial sword's chi exploded, mincing Li Qingshan's organs and crushing his indestructible tiger bones. The sword light flashed, and Li Qingshan passed by. Li Qingshan glanced back, and his body shattered loudly, turning into phoenix flames that filled the sky. With a phoenix cry, the phoenix danced, and the flames retracted, turning back into Li Qingshan's body. A pair of red eyes stared at Battle Devil Hun, as if saying, "It's not over yet." Battle Devil Hun held his sword and stood on his horse, casting aside all other thoughts. In his eyes, there was only Li Qingshan's existence. There was only one thought in his mind, and that was to kill him. "Let's see how many times you can resurrect. Every time you resurrect, I will kill you. Every time you resurrect, I will kill you 10 times, until your soul is destroyed and you are beyond redemption." Nirvana rebirth was a powerful divine ability, but in the face of absolute power, it was just a matter of time. Li Qingshan also understood and smiled. "Don't worry, this is the last time. One more time and he would turn into an egg, which was no different from being killed." This was also the limit of the number of Nirvana rebirths he could achieve as a demon king. Even if he broke through to the 5th layer of the Phoenix realm, it would not increase. This was the true final battle. "Then die." Battle Devil Hun waved his sword, the twisting and changing sword aura shot towards Li Qingshan from an unimaginable angle. Clang! Li Qingshan cut through the streak of light with his blade. His mind was as tranquil as the ocean. Only with the divination of the spirit turtle and his instincts for battle did he manage to block the attack. The strange sword chi it contained made his whole body tremble. The next moment, the real sword edge slashed in front of him, almost without any warning. The spirit turtle's profound shell appeared and shattered. Ox demon forges its hide, tear. The edge of the sword collided with the tiger bone, and the sound of metal clashing rang out. Only when the tip of the sword pierced into the tiger's bone did it stop. Boom! Li Qingshan fell into the sea of blood, stirring up huge waves. Battle Devil Hun followed him like a shadow. The sea of blood surged over, shattering when it came within 300 meters of him, spraying blood everywhere. The skulls cackled as they assembled into the skeleton demon formation, attempting to stop Battle Devil Hun. Battle Devil Hun did not even look at them. With a swing of the sword, the 3 skulls blocking his way were split in half silently. They erupted with surging Samdi flames of white bone, illuminating the gloomy sea of blood. Battle Devil Hun charged out of the sea of fire and laughed madly. "What's wrong, Li Qingshan? Is this all you've got? How pitiful." It was no longer possible to tell whether this was Battle Devil Hun's voice or the Forsaken Immortal's voice. He swung his sword high into the air and swung down violently. The deep sea of blood was split in half by the twisting streak of light. Li Qingshan gritted his teeth as he stood within it. He swung his blade again, barely managing to block another attack. A crack appeared on the blade. "No, you're not his opponent," the wildflower sword soul could not help but say. "Are you afraid?" Li Qingshan smiled. The wildflower sword soul was speechless. As an Azura divine weapon, it was impossible for her to admit that she was afraid. She knew that as a weapon, she was destined to face such an outcome. But when the day came, she still wanted to continue living. She did not want to accept such a fate. "It's okay, I'm afraid too," Li Qingshan said calmly. He was also afraid of death. Who was not afraid of death? However, this was the path he had chosen, a path that would bet his life on. Even if he was afraid, he would not hesitate. Battle Devil Hun rapidly approached, like a god of death descending. The shadow of death enveloped him. This was the first time he had been so close to death since becoming a Monster King. However, his heart blazed with the desire to live. So he flapped his wings and soared into the sky, brandishing his blade as he did his best to meet Battle Devil Hun. Xiaoan was extremely nervous. She desperately powered the Blood Sea banner and skull prayer beads to interfere with the war demon Hun's movements, but it was basically useless. She forcefully resisted entering the sea of blood, as she understood very well that it was impossible for her Buddha-slaying sword to land a hit on the war demon Hun. Instead, she would be heavily injured by the Forsaken Immortal sword. Li Qingshan would be distracted, which would instead lead to negative effects. She unconsciously bit her lip, not even noticing that blood had seeped out. No, it was not enough. She had to become even stronger. The wildflower sword and the demon sword separated as soon as they came into contact. Li Qingshan was once again sent flying. A terrible wound appeared on his chest, spreading from his left shoulder to his right. It was so deep that bone could be seen. If it were not for the fact that his tiger bones were hard, he would have been cut in half. Before he could recover from his injuries, Battle Devil Hun followed him like a shadow. He was still a hair away from the 5th layer of the Phoenix transformation, but he had no time to consider where this hair was. Roar. A tiger's roar shook the heavens and earth, containing incomparable rage. The Battle Devil banner fluttered against the wind. Blade light flashed. Li Qingshan unleashed his full power and fought with Battle Devil. The blade light and sword shadows blurred their figures. In the end, only the sword wheel and the blade wheel could be seen clashing fiercely. From the sky to the sea of blood, and from the sea of blood to the sky, waves of sharp air currents shattered the sea of blood and tore through the void. Die, 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 die. Battle Devil Hun roared crazily. His expression was twisted and crazed. He displayed the Forsaken Immortal sword's eccentric swordsmanship to its fullest. It was unknown how many times stronger he was than Elder Tien. In an instant, the Doomsday Frenzied blade was covered in sword marks. Li Qingshan was also covered in cuts and bruises. Blood splattered everywhere, turning into raging flames. Just maintaining this state of extreme power caused his body and soul to be on the verge of collapse. Death approached step by step. It was as if a dark abyss was dragging him into it, causing him to continuously fall. However, Li Qingshan felt that his heart was getting hotter and hotter. He was deeply rejecting death. The darker the darkness, the brighter the flames. The deeper he fell into the abyss, the more he spread his wings and soared. Die! Battle Devil Hun shouted. The edge of his sword cut through the blade wheel and ruthlessly slashed into Li Qingshan's body. Between life and death, a voice in Li Qingshan's heart became clearer and louder. It turned into a sonorous phoenix cry. Phoenix Nirvana, undying heart. The phoenix's wings suddenly spread out to their limits. The wingspan was astonishingly thousands of feet, and it glowed with a brilliant light. Phoenix Transformation, 5th Layer. Chapter 1131. The phoenix's glorious cry rang through the sea of blood, causing the millions of souls to experience a moment of peace as they gazed up at the undying divine bird. A flash of sternness flashed across the battle devil's face, which was immediately covered by madness and distortion. He swung his sword and cut through the sea of blood. The phoenix descended from above, pecking at the battle devil with its sharp beak. This was the blade in Li Qingshan's hand. The moment the blade and sword collided, dazzling light erupted and space shattered. With a rip, a huge gap appeared in the Bloodsea banner. Under the King of Southern Yu's assistance, everyone worked together to suppress the surging demon chi. The battle cries in the demon cavern grew louder and louder. At this crucial moment, the battle devil's appearance made everyone's expressions change. The strange, twisted Forsaken Immortal Sword was enough to instantly nullify all of their efforts. Li Qingshan suddenly tossed something high into the air, and a blood-red swirl blossomed in the air. It was the Azura field. He flew into it with a beautiful arc of light. The battle devil hesitated for a moment. In the past, he definitely would have destroyed Little and the others' plans to suppress the Azura field first, but now, the Forsaken Immortal Sword's madness had already sunk deep into his heart. His killing intent and hatred towards Li Qingshan occupied his mind, so he charged into the Azura field right after him. His vision was covered in a layer of blood red. It was different from sinking into the sea of blood. Instead, it was a warrior's song of blood. It called out the primal desire for slaughter in his heart, so his killing intent grew heavier and heavier. Li Qingshan stood with his back to him. The phoenix wings shrunk to normal size, and he exhaled gently. If the battle devil did not pursue him, then there would be nothing he could do. Hehe, are you finally afraid? Unfortunately, it's already too late. Once I kill you, I'll kill all the people you love and those who love you. You'll understand the consequences of opposing me. The battle devil smiled viciously as his killing intent surged. Before he had even attacked, the blood-red swirl in the sky began to spin rapidly, like a single eye watching the battle. Then come. Li Qingshan turned around. The tip of his sword was already several feet away from his nose, and he flapped his wings. He retreated rapidly, but the tip of his sword struggled to cross the several feet. It was so close that it seemed like the distance between them. After cultivating to the 5th layer of the phoenix, his speed was not inferior to the battle devil Hun's. However, this was only the beginning. A revolution was taking place. The tilted scales were slowly recovering their balance. Water and fire, the spirit turtle and phoenix, even the gods and demons. In the blink of an eye, Li Qingshan had already retreated to the edge of the Azura field. He could no longer retreat or dodge. The Forsaken Immortal Sword would easily tear the Azura field apart. He pressed his fingers together like a sword and pointed at the tip of the sword. Dumo Hun's sinister smile became even sharper. The sharpness of the abandoned Immortal Sword was not something that could be blocked by flesh and blood. No matter how many divine arts he had, he would still be pierced by the sword. Li Qingshan didn't use any divine abilities. A wisp of flame ignited at the tip of his finger, and at the same time, a stream of water flowed out, coiling into the shape of a drill. Battle Devil Hun suddenly felt a strange power coming from the tip of the sword, which disintegrated his sword chi. He was shocked and became even more furious. He used all his strength and thrust his sword forward. Bang! It was as if thousands of fireworks had bloomed at the same time. In the resplendent light, Dumo Hun flew back 5 kilometers. Li Qingshan crashed heavily into the invisible barrier behind him. A large crack appeared on the barrier. A drop of blood seeped out of the falling fingertip of his right hand. The sword chi pierced through his heart meridian and headed straight for his heart. "Are you crazy? Use the blade," the wildflower blade soul roared. "You'll shatter if you use it anymore. Take a break. Let me deal with the rest." Li Qingshan looked at the scarred end of the wildflower blade in his hand. He tossed it casually and it stabbed into a distant mountain peak. "Accept your fate." Dumo Hun swung his sword and pounced forward. "Fate?" Li Qingshan smiled. He brought his fists together and chanted, "Ox, phoenix, tiger, tortoise." Every word was incomparably solemn and heavy. It was as if they were separated by a long distance, but they were chanted in an instant. The illusions of ox demon, phoenix, tiger demon, and spirit tortoise appeared above and below him. They spun rapidly and formed a blurry circle of light. Li Qingshan felt power he had never felt before fill his body and soul. He had ox horns and ox hooves, phoenix wings and phoenix feathers, tiger teeth and tiger claws, turtle back and turtle eyes. All sorts of transformations gathered on him. In that moment, he was the ox demon and the tiger demon, the spirit turtle and the phoenix. But after balancing out all of his divine and demonic natures, he was still Li Qingshan. So he stretched out his left hand and the unpredictable blade fell into his hand. Blood splattered everywhere, but he held it tightly. He stretched out his right hand and clenched it into a fist. He punched Dumo Hun's shocked face. Boom! Dumo Hun smashed into the ground like a comet. The left side of his face caved in. He was utterly enraged. Li Qingshan did not follow up with another attack. Instead, he spread his arms and pursed his lips firmly. His muscles bulged, and the ground shook violently. Several hundred boulders flew into the air. As he clenched his fists, they rapidly compressed and condensed into fist-sized pebbles that revolved around him. Under Dumo Hun's shocked gaze, the entire Azura realm shook violently. With Li Qingshan at the center, wild winds whistled and flames blazed. Water surged into the sky, intertwining around him. They were earth, fire, wind, and water, the 4 origin substances of the world. At that moment, he seemed to dominate this world. "Dumo Hun, your time of death has come," Li Qingshan declared. His voice contained the moos of the ox demon, the roar of the tiger demon, the cry of the phoenix, and the silence of the spirit tortoise at the same time. The entire Azura realm echoed. "You've only won one move. Do you really think you can win this battle?" Dumo Hun turned into a streak of light and rushed into the air. Li Qingshan raised his right arm, and a mountain rose from the ground. With a rumble, the streak of light pierced through the mountain. Li Qingshan sucked in a deep breath and blew hard. Within the deafening roar of a tiger, wild winds whistled, and the streak of light gradually slowed down. The mountain behind him was blown away by the wild winds, turning into dust. The streak of light paused, and Dumo Hun's figure appeared again. He was blown away with an expression of disbelief. Li Qingshan flew up and pushed forward with his left hand. 5 sparks surged out from his fingers, turning into huge fireballs. They arced through the air and fell towards Dumo Hun like meteors. Dumo Hun galloped madly on his horse, but the meteors chased after him relentlessly. Even he dared not take the scorching heat head-on. He made a few sharp turns, and the 5 fireballs exploded one after another behind him, creating lakes of lava. Impossible. How can his strength increase to such a level in an instant? Dumo Hun cried out inside. An invisible force pressed down heavily on him, and the ground within a radius of 5 kilometers suddenly sank by several meters. In that instant, firelight illuminated his face, and a sphere formed from earth, fire, wind, and water descended from the sky. He used the forsaken immortal sword in a hurry, and his figure blurred, appearing 300 meters away. Boom! The sphere struck the ground, and a wave of earth surged out in all directions, covering a radius of 50 kilometers. Just now, it had calmed down and turned into a ring of mountains. The ground had completely changed. Chapter 1132. The war devil let out a hysterical roar. Li Qingshan's expression was indifferent. His eyes were filled with the light of divinity and devil. It was as if he had become one with the heaven and earth, bringing with him a lofty aura of the heaven and earth. "There's something strange about this Li Qingshan," said the black warhorse. "I'm afraid it has something to do with this realm. Let's kill our way out. Do you want to swallow the bitter fruit of failure? Do you want to be mocked by the other demon folk? Do you want more power? I just need some sacrifices." The forsaken immortal sword soul's voice echoed in Battle Devil Hun's mind. "I must win," said Battle Devil Hun while gnashing his teeth. Suddenly, he swung his sword backward. Blood splashed everywhere, and a huge horse head flew into the air. It looked at Battle Devil Hun in shock and anger. In today's battle, there is only victory and no defeat. If you can't win, then only death awaits you." The war demon raised his celestial abandonment sword high up in the air. The twisted sword light swallowed the warhorse impatiently. The horse's head melted in the sword light before it even hit the ground, dyeing the blade with a layer of blood. A new power surged out of his body, and his demonic chi became stronger and stronger. It was able to fight against Li Qingshan in the sky as an equal. Li Qingshan watched indifferently until Dumo's demonic energy swelled to its peak. Only then did he say, "Are you ready? Die." The ground beneath Battle Devil Hun's feet split apart and soared into the sky. Li Qingshan descended from the sky, riding on the sphere formed by earth, fire, wind, and water. Boom! Heaven and earth trembled. Two silhouettes froze in the sky. There were no divine arts or swordsmanship. There was only the violent collision of primitive forces. The wildly dancing sword wheel and the rings of earth, fire, wind, and water clashed thousands of times in an instant. The airflow and the halo rippled. It caused the entire Azura field to tremble. The blood-colored vortex in the sky spun rapidly. Suddenly, a small figure appeared from the depths of the vortex. He was wearing a red doudou and had his hair tied up in a bun. He was holding a slingshot in his hand. He looked like a little boy. Li Qingshan glanced around from the corner of his eye and thought, "Has an Azura king finally appeared? And he seems to be quite strong." Although he looked a little special, in the world of cultivation, appearances meant nothing. War Devil, on the other hand, was extremely fearful. After all, this was Li Qingshan's Azura field. If the Azura king joined the battle, if they came to help Li Qingshan, the situation would become very unfavorable. Sigh, there's no end to the fighting and killing. But this place isn't as weak as I thought. The little boy opened his lifeless, dead fish eyes. He didn't have the usual Azura's enthusiasm for fighting and killing. On the contrary, his interest waned. Not to mention participating in the battle, he didn't even have the interest to watch the battle. He sighed and looked away, making people wonder if he really belonged to the Azura tribe. He pressed his hands against the blood-colored vortex and struggled to free his legs. He descended from the sky, and the aftermath of the fierce battle swept through the Azura field. When it reached his side, it separated into two, unable to touch him at all. Yin Qing hid in the void to avoid the aftershocks of the battle. When she saw the dark sun and moon pattern on the boy's doudou, she immediately revealed a look of shock. "There's also an Azura sacrificial altar here." The little boy first landed on the Azura sacrificial altar, then flashed to the side of the last flower frenzy saber. He stood on his tiptoes and grabbed the saber handle to pull it out. I think it's called Last Flower Frenzy." Then, he flashed back to the Azura sacrificial altar. This time, the speed he displayed was not any slower than Li Qingshan and War Devil. In fact, he was even more relaxed. He was like a dead fish, lying on the Azura sacrificial altar. His eyes were lifeless as he looked at the blood-colored vortex in the sky. He waved the Last Flower Frenzy saber in his hand a few times, looking extremely bored. Once again, people began to doubt his race. "Let go of me," the frenzy saber soul roared, and the saber blade trembled. However, after a bitter battle, It was unable to resist the grip of that small hand. Sigh, I'm hated again. He casually threw the last flower frenzy saber to the side and hugged the slingshot. Little girl, you're still the best. What the hell is this thing? Not good. Li Qingshan's indifferent eyes revealed a look of surprise. He found that the earth, fire, wind, and water around him had a trace of disharmony. His current posture not only came from his own strength, but also from his absolute control over the entire Azura field. In order to maintain this posture, he didn't even dare to use his supernatural powers. However, the appearance of this little boy caused a huge flaw in his control, even though he didn't do anything. How could War Devil let go of such a good opportunity? The edge of his sword cut through the rings of wind, water, and fire, chopping towards Li Qingshan with irresistible force. Li Qingshan waved his arms, and the surrounding stones stopped in front of him. He suddenly pushed with both hands, and the stones shattered into pieces, turning into a sandstorm. War Devil turned into a curved sword light, dodging at high speed, but he was still sucked into the sandstorm. Explosions resounded, and the ground was filled with smoke and dust. It was full of holes. When the smoke and dust dispersed, War Devil's body was badly mutilated. He grinned and said, Li Qingshan, it's over. You can't win against me, you'll never win against me. After saying this, he raised the abandoned immortal sword high up and chopped at the void in front of him, trying to escape from the Azura field. No, kill him first. War Devil's expression changed, and he stopped. You idiot, I'll naturally kill him later. Right now, I need more sacrifices. Kill him. War Devil clenched his teeth, and his expression kept changing. He was arguing loudly with himself, as if he was suffering from schizophrenia. There was a huge difference between man and sword. It wasn't that War Devil was stupid, and he didn't understand the principle of being weak first and then strong later. Just now, in the intense battle, he could feel the will of the abandoned immortal sword's soul seeping into him, trying to enslave him. Just now, it had chosen to escape without his consent. This situation was very dangerous, and it was even worse than fighting with Li Qingshan. If the abandoned immortal sword obtained a large number of sacrifices, it would completely gain the upper hand. Only by fighting with Li Qingshan and continuously exhausting the abandoned immortal sword's power could he maintain the balance and avoid becoming a sword slave. External power really isn't that easy to borrow. Power that I can't control will only enslave me, Li Qingshan thought, but he didn't take the opportunity to attack. Instead, he shouted, Hey, kid, go home. Only by chasing away this strange Azura child could he be confident that he could suppress War Devil in the Azura field. Otherwise, even if he won, it would be meaningless. What does it matter to you? The little boy turned around and lay down on the Azura sacrificial altar. This is my territory. If you don't want to go home, then come help me. Otherwise, if this place is destroyed, you won't be able to stay, Li Qingshan said. You're an Azura? The little boy asked weakly. I will be in the future. Li Qingshan let out a murderous aura. I hate Asuras. The little boy picked his nose. Aren't you an Azura too? Li Qingshan asked. I hate myself too. The little boy changed his finger and continued to pick his nose. Fine, I'm actually a human. I hate humans more. The little boy put the nostril he had just picked up into his mouth and tasted it. Bah, bah. It's like booger. Ah, I don't have booger. Chapter 1133. A strand of sword chi rushed into the air. Li Qingshan suddenly looked back, and the streak of light shot through the air, twisting and turning as it shot over. Battle Devil Hun and Celestial Abandoned Sword had reached a temporary agreement. They would kill Li Qingshan first. Li Qingshan frowned. He flapped his phoenix wings and took off into the air, flying towards the horizon and rushing towards the center of the blood-red swirl. He thought, the only thing I can do right now is send him into the Azura realm. Even if the chances aren't great, I can only try. Layers of bloody clouds passed by him. The blood-colored whirlpool was like a funnel hanging upside down in the sky. It was much deeper than it looked. The higher Li Qingshan flew, the narrower the surroundings became. The aura of the Azura realm became stronger, making people's killing intent boil in their hearts. As expected, Battle Devil Hun followed closely behind, constantly closing the distance between them. The whirlpool became narrower and narrower. There was not much room to move up. Li Qingshan turned to face Battle Devil Hun, preparing to use his innate divine ability. In the blood-colored whirlpool above his head, a single eye suddenly appeared. It was 10 miles in radius. The bright red color was like a bloody lake, and the pupil was even redder. Li Qingshan's heart trembled. What was this? Battle Devil Hun also paused and looked towards the sky. If this was not a monster with only one eye, then the figure of the owner of the eye could be imagined. That must be an unimaginably powerful existence in the Azura realm. Even with the invisible barrier of the domain, the gaze cast by the blood-red eyes seemed to have substance, filled with a frenzied murderous hostility, and seemed to be searching for something. How annoying. The little boy lay on the ground again and murmured. Under the gaze of the blood-colored eye, Li Qingshan felt the blood in his body boil. In an instant, the sense of threat it brought him was far greater than Battle Devil Hun's. He punched out almost instinctively. Black shockwaves roared and turned into interweaving cracks that tore the passage between the Azura realm and the Azura realm. It blocked the line of sight of the bloody eye. He still felt a lingering fear. Die. Battle Devil Hun seized the opportunity. The sword light split and turned, filling up the blood-red vortex and swallowing Li Qingshan. Behind him was the shattered void, and there was nowhere for him to retreat. The only thing he could do was to block the sword light. Once he lost the upper hand, he would fall into an extremely dangerous situation. At this time, the little boy bounced up from the Shura sacrificial altar and took out a stone from his waist pocket. He tightened the slingshot in his hand and shot it into the sky. In an instant, his entire aura changed. His decadence and melancholy were swept away, and a black light that could pierce through everything shot out from his eyes, causing the world to darken. That is indeed, hidden in the void, Yin Qing's vision was also shrouded in darkness. The remaining words were also swallowed up by the darkness. The darkness also covered Li Qingshan and Dumo's astonished expressions. In the deep darkness, it was as if he had experienced an eternity. Or perhaps it only lasted for a moment. When the darkness vanished, Battle Devil Hun's sword-wielding arm suddenly snapped. The severed arm gripped the Forsaken Immortal sword firmly and continued flying towards Li Qingshan, but it had lost its original power. Li Qingshan raised an eyebrow. The thing that had snapped Battle Devil Hun's arm was the stone the boy had shot out with the slingshot. It could be regarded as a sneak attack, but how could sneak attacks be so easy at their level of cultivation? Just now, the darkness was extremely strange. It was like a black curtain that had fallen down. Although it lasted for an extremely short period of time, it enveloped and obscured everything, obscuring Battle Devil Hun's senses. This was definitely not something a regular Azura king could use. Just where did this kid come from? He obviously would not miss out on such a great opportunity. With a single thought, he had already burst through the layers of light. He powered the force field of the world and sucked the Forsaken Immortal sword into his hand. Gripping it firmly, he bellowed out, "Spirit Turtle suppresses the seas." Battle Devil Hun suddenly experienced unprecedented weakness. His severed arm grew back in the blink of an eye, returning to its original state. It was not a particularly severe injury. However, the stone did not just break his arm. His connection with the Forsaken Immortal sword had been severed too. He gazed down in surprise and fury. The boy had returned to his original appearance, collapsing on the Azura altar of armaments. He murmured to himself, "Who told me to hate demon folk the most? Thanks." Li Qingshan laughed aloud and thanked him. The Forsaken Immortal sword in his hand erupted with thousands of streaks of light. He was reluctant to be suppressed and felt like he could not hold on any longer. He sneered, and the muscles on his arm tightened, turning a faint green. He powered the power of tremors at full strength. The Forsaken Immortal sword trembled violently, producing a series of resonances. Enveloped by the black shockwaves, the dazzling streaks of light constantly shattered. "If you resist again, I'll destroy you," Li Qingshan said sternly. No matter how tough the material the Forsaken Immortal sword was forged from, It was impossible for it to contend against him now that it had lost its master, sword slave. The power of tremors was extremely destructive to solid objects. It was enough to completely shatter and destroy the Forsaken Immortal Sword after it ran out of power. All right. I can fight for you. I'll acknowledge you as the master of the Forsaken Immortal Sword. Stop. The soul of the Forsaken Immortal Sword immediately gave in. As a sword, it was not afraid of failure. No matter who obtained it, they would need its power. It was reluctant to destroy it. However, just now, it could clearly sense that Li Qingshan was serious. He was filled with brutal determination. No matter how violently it twisted and twisted, its will to live remained. The battle devil was indeed astonishing. He did not try to take back the Forsaken Immortal Sword. Instead, he attacked the void in front of him with all his might, preparing to escape. After the Forsaken Immortal Sword was taken away, his mind became much clearer. He understood that he had no chance of winning this battle. There was no way he could kill Li Qingshan in his current state. However, this was not entirely a bad thing. At the very least, he had freed himself from the Forsaken Immortal Sword. He did not have to worry about becoming a sword slave again. Wait until I return to the outside world and meet up with the army. Then, I'll fight him to the death. Chimph, you want to leave? Li Qingshan flew down. The Forsaken Immortal Sword Soul said, refine me. You will obtain unprecedented power. Killing trash like this will be as easy as drinking water. Shut up. Most of Li Qingshan's strength was used to suppress the Forsaken Immortal Sword, to prevent it from suddenly turning against him and fleeing. The power of the Azura field alone was not enough to stop the War Devil Hun from fleeing. Right when the War Devil Hun was about to flee, a bone sword appeared outside the Azura field, stabbing towards the War Devil Hun. The Battle Devil's heart went cold. He felt a sense of danger. The sword was covered in a layer of faint golden light, and it was extremely terrifying. However, Li Qingshan had already arrived. He clenched his teeth and condensed his chi into a sword to deflect the bone sword. Scram! The war demon charged out of the Azura field and brushed past Xiaoan. He felt a slight pain in his waist. He had been cut by the edge of a sword. Such a small wound was not even worth mentioning. Even if the Buddha's light prevented the wound from healing, it was nothing. He would not die even if he was cleaved in half. Under his surging demonic chi, the Buddhist light was washed away in the blink of an eye. The wound was exposed, and death suddenly began to spread. His body stiffened, and he was pulled back into the Azura field by an invisible force. Chapter 1134. The battle demon was just like everyone else who had been struck by the Buddha slaying sword. He was in disbelief as he watched the pale white flames surge and spread. He felt as weak as a mortal. You've lost. Li Qingshan said. I've lost. In the final moment of life and death, the battle demon instead recovered his composure. The demon domain is determined to obtain the 9 provinces and the Forsaken Immortal Sword. Very soon, you'll follow in my footsteps, Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan gazed at the Forsaken Immortal Sword in his hand and smiled. The demon domain is indeed very troublesome, but it can't be more troublesome than Qiongqi. Demon God Qiongqi. The battle demon was stunned. He stared at Li Qingshan deeply before being swallowed by the flames. A sliver of surprise flashed through the eyes of the boy who lay on the Azura altar of armaments like a corpse. He thought, Qiongqi? That's indeed troublesome, but what does it have to do with me? Am I supposed to be less troublesome? Little and stowed a ball of flames into his sleeve. Li Qingshan asked, how's it going outside? It's all right. Let's go take a look. Then Li Qingshan told the boy, Oi, stay here for a while. I'll talk to you later. However, he understood extremely well that with the great power this strange Azura king had demonstrated just now, no one could stop it from leaving the Azura field, not even him, the master of the Azura field. The boy lay there without moving at all. He said feebly, Don't talk to me. I hate you. Outside the Azura field, the king of Southern Yu and Chu Lai King worked together, slowly suppressing the surging demon chi. It was all thanks to Little Anne's chaotic soul bell and the golden cicada Spirit King's cicada cry that they managed to effectively disrupt the demon folk army. They managed to earn a lot of time. However, there were clearly powerful experts among the demon folk army as well. They rapidly approached Great Buddha Mountain. Strange. Why haven't the reinforcements from the Dragon Province arrived yet? Jin Fugue powered the surging black cloud sand. The Green Province was far away from the Dragon Province, but both the Hawk God Protector and the royal advisors of the left and right should have arrived a long time ago. Against the invasion of the demon domain, it would not be strange for the 3 directors and 9 ministers of the Dragon Province to set out together. Why was it that they had not shown up yet? There's no need to think about it. He won't come. The divine kingdom of the other folk has fallen because of demon folk. How can they follow in their footsteps? Jiyu Yangying said. The invasion of the demonic domain concerns all living beings in the 9 states. Who can stay out of it? Yu Wuyang frowned heavily. Unless they had no other choice, the other folk did not want to oppose the demon folk either. What if the emperor of the great Xia dynasty has other plans? Jiyu Yangying shrugged. There was a hint of playfulness in his voice. Another plan? Jin Fugue was slightly taken aback. Chu Lai King and the others heard it as well. Jiyu Yangying was born in the Dragon Province. Her identity was extraordinary, and the people she came into contact with were members of the imperial family and nobility. Her information was far more abundant than a 10,000-year-old dragon like the Dragon King of the Sea. She even surpassed kings of a province like Chu Lai King and the King of Southern Yu. Her words could not help but raise many wild and fanciful speculations. The dauntless monk and the unraging monk exchanged glances. They had felt doubtful a long time ago as well. As the leader of the Buddhist sects in the world, the Lingua Temple ignored the appearance of the enemy of Buddha and the invasion of demon folk. It was extremely strange. Just what was brewing in the Dragon Province right now? However, they could not afford to consider that right now. Jiyu Yangying's words were equivalent to cutting off all possibilities of reinforcements. If it were not for the fact that the great cultivators were all people with unwavering willpower, they probably would have scattered already. The current situation had not taken a turn for the better. The roars and battle cries in the demon cavern drew closer and closer. Once the demon domain army killed their way out, no one would have the strength to fight them anymore. Your Majesty, we've already done everything we can. Why don't we retreat to the Mist Province? A great cultivator secretly suggested to the King of Southern Yu. What's done is done. There's no need to say anything more, the King of Southern Yu said firmly. The great cultivator said nothing more, but he was clearly rather displeased. When he struck out, he held back even more. The King of Southern Yu understood the temperaments of his honored guests. They were probably all displeased with his decision. If they did not take any risks, they could still lend a hand, but once the demon folk charged out, they would immediately request for retreat. And, it was impossible for him to use his own resources to forcefully clash with the demon folk. He thought, Li Qingshan, oh Li Qingshan. I've really done everything I can. At this moment, Li Qingshan stepped out of the Azura field with the Forsaken Immortal sword in hand. He looked around and said loudly, I've slain the demon of the war. Everyone riled up with vigor. Some of them even found it rather unbelievable. Just how terrifying was the combination of the demon of the war and the Forsaken Immortal sword? Yet, Li Qingshan had actually slain and taken the sword away. Just how powerful was he right now? At this moment, the battle cries in the demon cavern were already inches away. The demon chi surged even more violently, struggling to suppress it. Li Qingshan passed the Forsaken Immortal sword to Little Anne. Be careful not to let it escape. The path of the sword it contains truly is extraordinary. It's definitely on par with the sword scripture of heaven and earth. You can take a shortcut and comprehend it. With that, he leapt into the demon cavern. Little Anne gripped the Forsaken Immortal sword and immediately began refining it. As soon as the Forsaken Immortal sword left Li Qingshan's hand, it began to tremble violently before gradually fading away. It wanted to flee into space. Little Anne first stabbed the sword into the Bloodsea banner, then pulled it out. It was already coated in a thick layer of bloody light. He then activated the skull prayer beads, turning them into tiny skulls that bit tightly onto the blade of the sword. Finally, he hung the chaotic soul bell at the end of the sword hilt. The sword trembled and clanged. He did not forget to say, "If you dare resist, I'll have Qing Shan destroy you when we get back." These methods and those words were indeed effective. The forsaken immortal sword gave up on struggling and turned to threaten him. "I'd advise you to obediently let go. Do you know what will happen to you if you want to become my sword master? Your mind will gradually become twisted, and your thoughts will become frenzied. In the end, you won't even be able to recognize yourself." Little and smiled. "If you say that, then you must have sensed it. Great beauty and white bone, life and death, withering and flourishing." In the eyes of the world, her heart of white bone had always been an extremely twisted and frenzied existence. Even though she had coincidentally obtained a sliver of humanity during her cultivation, that was definitely not her true nature. If a mere sword soul wanted to shake the great will and great vow of the path of white bone and great beauty, it would be a fool's dream. The forsaken immortal sword soul was momentarily speechless. It muttered viciously, "Just what are the origins of these two?" Li Qingshan's figure swelled in the wind, turning into a towering ox demon. He swung his fists down. Boom, 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 boom. The demon cavern was in shambles, covered in crisscrossing spatial cracks. However, this was only a temporary measure. The surging demon Qi clearly did not fear the slashes of space, and the cracks would eventually recover. Li Qingshan sucked in a deep breath and leaned over the demon cavern. He murmured, "Spirit turtle transformation." Chapter 1135. Li Qingshan arched his back high into the air, turning into a five-colored turtle shell. His four limbs hung down like four huge pillars that held up the sky. However, the color of his body was as gentle as jade, shining with divine light. He sank down slowly, and the demon Qi surged and dispersed. The spirit turtle suppresses the seas, remaining completely still. Everyone was speechless for a moment. They were stunned by this power. Boom! The huge spirit turtle that Li Qingshan had transformed into suppressed the demon cavern, pushing the power of the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression to the limit. He let out a deep roar, like a dragon's roar from the depths of the ocean. The demon folk army surged before the demon cavern, only to see a jade wall that glowed with divine light blocking their way. "That idiot fighting demon Hun, his entire army has been wiped out." The commander of the demon army was a short, old woman. She was naked, but she was covered in red fur. Her withered face was filled with ruthlessness. She said to the demon kings behind her without even looking back, "Shatter him." In that moment, streaks of demonic light illuminated the entire demon cavern, shooting over. The red-haired old woman smiled viciously. The power of several dozen demon kings striking out together was so great that it could instantly destroy a mountain. Trying to block the demon cavern with their bodies was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. However, the jade wall suddenly flashed with a mirror-like luster, reflecting the demonic light back, which surged violently in the narrow demon cavern. The red-haired old woman's face changed, and she retreated backwards. Her retreat was not a big deal, so the demon kings retreated with her. Originally, it was not like they could not stop them with their strength, but none of them wanted to stand out. As a result, the demonic light whistled into the demon folk army. Countless demon folk were reduced to dust, suffering heavy casualties. Li Qingshan sniggered. Just like when he used the ox demon transformation, the spirit turtle's profound shell and the profound light illuminates all were his two great innate abilities. Their power had reached an unprecedented level, and he could use them freely like he was eating or drinking. The red-haired old woman flew into a rage. "All of you, get him. I'll definitely kill anyone who takes another step back." Seeing how her techniques were ineffective, the red fur all over her body surged, stabbing towards Li Qingshan like millions of needles. The demon kings rushed over too, attacking furiously. Li Qingshan felt an itch in his abdomen, followed by a violent vibration. If this went on, he wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Raising his head that resembled both a dragon and a snake, He asked Chu Lai King, "What are you waiting for, my friend?" "All right." Chu Lai King waved his sleeves and pointed downwards. The Qingju cauldron fell heavily, and with a loud bang, it pressed down on the turtle's back. Li Qingshan carried the mountain-like Qingju cauldron on his back. Not only did he not feel uncomfortable, but he also felt that he was with the entire Qingju, forming a perfect whole. The mountains and rivers of the Qingju flashed past his peaceful eyes. Every mountain was his body, and every river was his blood. The itchiness and pain in his abdomen instantly lessened. Chu Lai King was also surprised. He had actually understood the Qingju cauldron in an instant and borrowed its power. The red-haired old woman gave up on attacking. Her face was gloomy. The realm above the Devil's Den was sealed again, although it did not have the demon-suppressing power of the demon-suppressing hall. However, it was far sturdier than the demon suppression hall. With their strength alone, it was impossible for them to break through it in a short period of time. The surging demon chi dispersed, revealing the starry sky again. Before they knew it, night had already fallen. Everyone could not help but look at the horizon. Never had they found the river of stars to be so resplendent. Looking further down, Great Buddha Mountain was no longer the same as before. In its place was the divine turtle with the huge cauldron on its back. He was the one who had ended the war. Qingshan. The unraging monk arrived before the spirit turtle. He was filled with mixed feelings. With Li Qingshan's strength, he could leave if he wanted to. No one could stop him. Even if demon folk ruled the world and turned the 9 provinces into a demon domain, not a single demon king would be able to do anything to him. Moreover, he could be regarded as half a war demon, so perhaps he would be even more at home. "Don't worry, master. The demon cauldron has already been suppressed." Li Qingshan turned his huge head. His deep eyes seemed azure blue at first glance, but as he gazed into them, they grew darker and darker, becoming as dark as the deep sea. They shone with the glow of divinity, flowing with Buddhist wisdom and tranquility. The unraging monk's heart warmed up. Even within Buddhism, just how many people could take on such responsibilities and make such sacrifices? Who was bold enough to say that his disciple was not worthy of being a Buddhist disciple? The dauntless monk brought his palms together towards Li Qingshan. "Amitba. I thank you in the place of all the living beings in the world. You might be a demon, but your actions are akin to the Buddhas, dragons, and elephants. You've rendered boundless virtue. Thank you for your praise, Abbot. I'd rather be an ox than a child." Li Qingshan suddenly understood Brother Ox's feelings a little. If he had to choose, he would rather carry a child on his back than become a beast for the Buddhas of the 9 heavens to ride on. The dauntless monk frowned, but there was a sigh of "just as I thought." "Exactly." The golden cicada spirit king smiled. Jiyu Yangying seemed to be in thought. She approached him and asked with a smile, "Is it heavy?" "Of course. Why don't you try carrying it on my back?" Li Qingshan said in exasperation. Actually, it was not heavy. Most importantly, he could not move at all. It was extremely suffocating. At a time like this, the water mirror's image demonstrated its usefulness. "I can't carry him." Jiyu Yangying laid out her hands. "Is it worth it to do this? I just want to do it. It doesn't matter whether it's worth it or not." With a thought, a mirror clone emerged from Li Qingshan's left eye and yawned. Soon afterwards, a mirror clone emerged from his right eye as well, turning its head forcefully. Under the spirit turtle transformation, all of the spirit turtle's innate abilities strengthened, ensuring sufficient mobility. "Looks like you've already found a way to deal with it," Jiyu Yangying said. "Of course. I can't stay here all the time. I still have to go to the Ink Sea." Li Qingshan smiled. "Li Qingshan, I'll be waiting for you in the Ink Sea. Don't make me wait too long." The Dragon King of the Sea left with a flick of his sleeve, turning into a swimming dragon and disappearing into the horizon. "We've fought side by side after all. Can't we turn enemies into friends?" Jiyu Yangying sighed. "Women shouldn't stick their noses into men's matters," Li Qingshan said. "Don't even think about it." Jiyu Yangying widened her eyes before breaking into a self-deprecating laugh. She extended her hand and patted Li Qingshan's head. I'm going. You can stay here. Crunch. Li Qingshan bit down, and Jiyu Yangying had already taken off with the wind. Her words drifted down from the horizon. Hurry up and get out of here. You still owe me something. I'll need your help very soon. Got it. Li Qingshan raised his head and looked at Chu Lai King and the King of Southern Yu. Can your majesties come over for a chat? I was just about to bid farewell. Qingshan, is there anything else you need help with? The King of Southern Yu said very amiably, which made Chu Lai King frown heavily. Little and has already told me about your help. I'll definitely repay you handsomely in the future, Li Qingshan said. You're too kind, Qingshan. The King of Southern Yu smiled. He had been waiting for that. Everything he had done in the Green Province could be said to be for the sake of Li Qingshan. With Li Qingshan's vengeful nature, he immediately felt like everything was worth it. Your Majesty, King of Chu, there's something I'd like to discuss with you, Li Qingshan said. What is it? Chu Lai King said. Chapter 1136. Good idea. If we want to suppress demon caverns long-term, tree kings are the best choice. The various demon caverns of the Mist Province are all being suppressed by a great banyan tree right now. The King of Southern Yu clapped his hands. He was eager for the banyan tree king to take over the Green Province and become the god of the province. Kid, you haven't disappointed me after all. A streak of golden light shot over. Madame Ting had been forced into retreat by Little Anne, so she was obviously reluctant to accept this. Coupled with the fact that the battle had truly been chilling, she had been hiding in the shadows the entire time, waiting for an opportunity. Chu Lai King said nothing in thought. He looked around. Everyone looked at him, waiting for his decision. However, apart from the Dauntless Monk and the Unraging Monk, both the Golden Cicada Spirit King and the King of Southern Yu would probably stand on Li Qingshan's side. As for his daughter, it went without saying. She basically seemed to be bewitched by Li Qingshan. He could not help but sneer. If I don't agree, you'll be forcing me to abdicate. Li Qingshan chuckled, but he did not deny it. He still had many things he needed to do. He definitely could not remain here for long. The gate of hungry ghosts in the Myriad Ghosts Abyss has opened. If we ignore it, the Green Province will become a land of death very soon, said Little Anne. This point was also verified by the huge cavity to the south of the Green Province cauldron. Your Majesty, it looks like that's all we can do. The Dauntless Monk considered it for a while before also going up to persuade him. He did not want Great Buddha Mountain to end up in the hands of diamonds, but it was better than being taken over by demon folk. The 9 cauldrons are a symbol of vassals of Great Shia, so what's there to be reluctant about? And, when the Green Province faced a disaster, has Great Shia ever sent a single soldier? Instead, it's me, your old enemy, who has come to help you. The King of Southern Yu stood with his hands behind his back and said slowly. Chu Lai King looked at the King of Southern Yu with a frown. The King of Southern Yu stared back without backing down. They were natural enemies. However, this grievance had been passed down from their ancestors. There were no specific grievances between them. Chu Lai King could not help but think about what Little Anne had said about the snail's horn. Perhaps it was time to put an end to this. He let out a long sigh and finally nodded. All right. After a moment of determination, he completely cut off the connection with the Qingju cauldron, turned around, and left. Your Majesty. The Dark Queen stepped forward. She bowed gracefully, showing more respect to this frustrated man than usual. Chu Lai King's stern expression softened a little. He looked back again. Little Anne was also watching him leave. He sighed in his heart. No matter what. The Ji clan had finally produced a cultivator with a boundless future. As for how far she could go, it would depend on her fortune. However, how could he be willing to fall behind his daughter? He took a deep breath and compared himself to the 10,000 worlds in the heavens. The 15,000 kilometers of the Green Province was truly nothing more than a snail's corner. As a result, he let go and said to the Dark Queen, "Come on a stroll across the sea with me." "I understand," the Dark Queen said gently. A streak of silver light rushed into the air. The King of Southern Yu rode the Silver Dragon King back to the Mist Province with his honored guests. Qingshan. I'll go meet up with the monks first. I'll be troubling you here, said the unraging monk. Go if you want to. Cut the nonsense, Li Qingshan said bluntly. After Chu Lai King completely severed his connection with the Qingju cauldron, he immediately felt much more at ease. He had benefited quite a lot from comprehending the laws of the world it contained. Damned disciple! The unraging monk bellowed before smiling to himself. It still sounds better like that. However, when he turned around, he saw the dauntless monk talking to the Golden Cicada Spirit King. He was extremely polite, which surprised him slightly. According to the seniority of the Chan Monastery of Nga, fellow Golden Cicada can be regarded as our senior. The dauntless monk brought his palms together. You're too polite, Abbot. How can someone who's been exiled be a senior? The Golden Cicada Spirit King returned the gesture. This is an old custom of the Chan Monastery of Nga. Looking at it now, there are some omissions. You've protected the Buddhist Dharma and purged the demons, so the Chan Monastery of Nga owes you greatly. I'm willing to take back the order of exile in the name of the abbot. I wonder if you're willing to accept that. Only then did Li Qingshan understand the dauntless monk's plans. Right now, the Chan Monastery of Nga was at its weakest. Not only had they lost their headquarters, but 2 of the 4 monk kings had died as well, and their other losses were innumerable. In these chaotic times, this was definitely not a good omen. If he could invite the Golden Cicada Spirit King back to the monastery, then his strength would instead increase by quite a lot. In terms of battle prowess alone, the 4 monk kings probably would not be the Golden Cicada Spirit King's opponent even if they worked together. He could not help but lament over the fact that all of these leaders were pragmatic. If this had happened to other demon kings, they probably would not have accepted it, but the Golden Cicada Spirit King's feelings for the monastery were extraordinary, so he did not treat his exile as some sort of injustice or humiliation. He brought his palms together. Then thank you for your magnanimity, Abbot. The man and demon hit it off immediately, meeting up with the monks and discussing the matter of rebuilding the monastery. Jin Fugue and Yu Wuyang bade farewell to them too. Madame Ting was still reluctant to meet the Banyan Tree King, so she had vanished a long time ago. In the blink of an eye, Great Buddha Mountain fell from the sky. Only the sound of wind could be heard. Little Anne hugged her knees as she sat on Li Qingshan's head, gazing at the crescent moon. Li Qingshan smiled and closed his eyes, submerging his mind into the Green Province cauldron. Time passed in a hurry. In Towering City, an ancient and soothing laughter suddenly rang out. The sea of trees surged. On the northern edge of the sea of trees, a great banyan tree sped up, growing until it reached half the size of the Banyan Tree King. It lit up with brilliant light and gradually shrank, turning into a humanoid shape and making its way north. Li Qingshan opened his eyes and smiled. We're finally here. With that, the Banyan Tree King arrived before Li Qingshan. He studied the spirit turtle with the huge cauldron on its back and praised with a smile, "You set off as soon as you heard the good news. As soon as you heard the good news, you immediately set off. Qingshan, your strength has increased by another level." "Same here. Let's take this Green Province cauldron." "Alright, but we need to take it slow this time, just in case the demon folk take advantage of the situation." "Of course. I'll stay here for a while longer, all the way until you become a god of the Green Province." The Banyan Tree King leapt into the Green Province cauldron. A while later, the cauldron erupted with brilliant light, rushing into the sky. Lush, green leaves surged out like a spring. A great banyan tree rose into the sky, and aerial roots extended and drooped down, wrapping around the Green Province cauldron and covering it. In the battle against the demon domain, the Green Province cauldron had been struck multiple times. Many fine cracks that were difficult to make out with the naked eye appeared on its surface, which made it convenient for the Banyan Tree King to extend his roots thinner than hair into it. Then, he used his countless branches to comprehend the laws of the world within. "I've already comprehended a part of it. You can use it as a reference," said Li Qingshan. Under the spirit turtle transformation, his ability to comprehend and calculate became even more startling, so he passed this information to the Banyan Tree King. You've actually comprehended it to such a level already. You sure are talented. You can save me quite a lot of time. The banyan tree king sighed in amazement. With the experience of digesting the Mist Province cauldron, his strength was incomparable to before. It was much easier this time, splitting the cauldron in an orderly manner. At the same time, the Dragon Province cauldron shook violently in the imperial court on Dragon's Head Mountain. A middle-aged man in bright yellow dragon robes and a crown on his head stroked the cauldron as he muttered to himself. Chapter 1137. In the desolate village, a shrouding aura of death enveloped the land. The land had become barren, even more deathly silent than a swarm of locusts. Not a single living creature existed. Even if there were one or two living creatures from time to time, they had already become subjects of the kingdom of death. Li Qingshan set foot in this land of death and could not help but frown. This was the instinctive disgust that living creatures had towards death. The sound of hooves rang out from behind him, and a corpse horse charged over. Most of its body had rotted away, revealing its white bones. Its eye sockets shone with clear, green light, filled with a desire to devour and hatred towards the living. Li Qingshan glanced back. He had sensed the corpse horse's existence a long time ago, but he never thought it would actually charge over. Has even the most basic sense of fear disappeared? There was a disturbance in the desolate village. Villagers emerged from the streets one by one. Their bodies were all half-rotted, and their movements were slow and rigid. When they saw Li Qingshan, they were like people who had starved for 3 days seeing a piece of meat. They all surged over. There were many agile and graceful existences, but they were all vengeful spirits and hungry ghosts. There was a phoenix's cry. Li Qingshan unfurled his wings and turned into a streak of fire, rushing towards the 10,000 ghosts abyss. The desolate village behind him was reduced to ashes in the flames. The ground flew backwards. Many cities and villages were swallowed by the aura of death as well, spreading for thousands of kilometers. Because they were close to a large sect like the Umbral Yin sect, and the disciples of the Umbral Yin sect were rather skilled in human tactics, even the soaring Locust King feared them, so they were not particularly affected by the Locust Plague. Instead, many people gathered here. They never thought they would run into a disaster like this after escaping the Locust Plague, turning them all into ghouls. A large city appeared on the horizon. It was no smaller than the prefectural city of Clear River. It must have been a prefectural city as well. Prosperity had already become an old dream. It had completely become a land of ghouls, numbering in the millions. Even the horror movies he had seen in his past life paled in comparison to this. Li Qingshan thought back to how the White Lotus Mother had slaughtered 200,000 people in a city for the sake of refining an arcane treasure, and he had been extremely shocked. Only now did he understand what it meant for human lives to be worthless. He could not help but sigh. It was a coldness that treated all living things as straw dogs. Flying above the city, he suddenly descended from the sky, using gravity to accelerate. He was like a meteor, dragging a long tail of flames behind him as he landed in the center of the city with a loud bang. A wave of earth swept through the entire city. The buildings collapsed one after another, burying countless ghouls. It was like a great earthquake, or rather, a great earthquake. As far as the eye could see, there were many tall buildings in the city. It had already turned into a pile of rubble. Looking at his own hands, he said, "This is my current strength, the power of destruction, and this is just a mirror image. What am I going to do with this power? Save the world and uphold justice? Or indulging in sensual pleasures? Do whatever I want." He flew away and continued forward. His words were left behind on the ruins of the city, and they drifted with the wind. "I'm sorry. Although I sympathize with your misfortune, I'm not fighting for you." When they were 300 miles away from the 10,000 ghosts abyss, Li Qingshan muttered, "Mystic light illuminates all." His field of vision suddenly zoomed in, and the 10,000 ghosts abyss was clearly reflected on the spirit turtle's profound shell. He could not help but be surprised. That a tower of white bone over 3,000 meters tall rose into the air, but it only seemed like the base. Its height after completion was unimaginable. Was it going to connect with the sky? Many figures busied about on the tower of bone, like construction workers toiling away in the city. However, when Li Qingshan unleashed the mystic light illuminates all, these construction workers all sensed something, turning around and looking over. The ones who built the towers were actually corpse kings, and the supervisor was a group of ghosts that kept changing forms. A translucent tentacle whipped the back of a corpse king. It looked light and almost gentle, but it caused the corpse king's entire body to tremble, and a whip mark appeared on its skin that could not be damaged by magic treasures. Keep going. Don't stop. If you don't finish in time, not only will the world not be able to tolerate you, but the hungry ghost realm will not tolerate you either. The ghost glanced past Li Qingshan through the spirit turtle's profound shell with a cold gaze, which made him feel like a snake had slithered past his back. He could not help but frown. No matter what the hungry ghost realm wanted to do, they were determined to obtain little Anne. If he left him alone, he would definitely become a great problem in the future. However, this was different from the war against the army of the demon domain. The Gowls had already established themselves and had even cast down a formation. The incomplete Tower of Bone was not complete, but it had clearly begun to take effect, which made him feel extremely threatened. The gate of hungry ghosts below had been ripped to a size even larger than the original 10,000 ghosts abyss. It was like the hungry ghost realm had opened its mouth and was about to swallow them. The mountainous green province cauldron was swallowed by the green, replaced by a towering tree. The dragon-like roots wrapped around the spirit turtle's body. Li Qingshan did not move at all. The sun, moon, and stars changed. Time passed by bit. The green province cauldron produced a soft sound. The roots that had penetrated deep into it grew vigorously, slowly widening the cracks and breaking them apart bit by bit. Torrential rain fell from the sky, washing away the ground contaminated by demon chi. The remaining Great Buddha Mountain stood in the grey rain. The rain gathered into a river and flowed down, wrapping around the great banyan tree. Li Qingshan suddenly opened his eyes. His body gradually changed, releasing a vibrating force. The Qingju cauldron emits buzzing noises, which sound like that of a great bell. Clang! The green province cauldron shattered into millions of rainbow-colored dust particles, sweeping away the torrential rain and the thick, dark clouds. For a moment, sunlight shone down, piercing through the gaps in the canopy. It shone resplendently. The great banyan tree swayed its branches, and the scattered rainbow-colored dust gathered on every single leaf. It was like a rainbow divine tree, growing at a faster rate once again. In a flash, Li Qingshan flew out from under the tree. He turned around and saw that the demon chi had just gushed out of the devil's den. The roots quickly spread and sealed the devil's den, digging deep into the ground. The tree grew taller and taller, looking like it could reach the sky. At the same time, countless great banyan trees rose from the ground in various parts of Qingju, causing countless living beings to look up in shock. The banyan tree king's aura became more vast and distant, surpassing that of ordinary so-called demons. It was like he was the representative of heaven and earth. And this was only the beginning. After refining the 9 cauldrons, he would truly become the god of the 9 provinces, the representative of the world's will. Li Qingshan asked with a smile, "How does it feel to become the god of Qingju?" "Not bad, or rather, very good," said the banyan tree king. "Can you borrow the power of heaven and earth to suppress the gate of hungry ghosts?" asked Li Qingshan. "No, my power can't enter it either. The white bone pagoda you mentioned seems to be completely shielded from the laws of heaven and earth. Unless it can be destroyed, it's absolutely impossible to suppress it." The banyan tree king also expressed his helplessness. "If you really want to suppress it, you'd better hurry. When the gate of hungry ghosts is torn even bigger, it'll be too late." Chapter 1138. That child. "You're talking about the Azura king." Li Qingshan was taken aback before returning to his senses. There was actually such a strange fellow in his Azura field. It was not that his memory was terrible, but that the child was startlingly obedient. He had been trapped in the tiny Azura field for so many days, yet he had not made any noise at all. He's no regular Azura king. If I'm not wrong, he should be a Rahu. Yin Qing said sternly. "What's a Rahu?" Li Qingshan was surprised. Don't tell me he's a Rahu Asura. The Banyan Tree King was surprised. Ever since he became a god, he had rarely experienced such obvious emotional fluctuations. Rahu is the name of the original Asura, as well as the first Asura of the Asura realm, as well as the god king of the Asura realm. Legend has it that he was slain by a god because of the water of undying. Ever since then, the Asura realm has fallen apart, descending into eternal war. Banyan Tree King Shaw is knowledgeable. However, the Rahu god king already possesses an undying body, so he was not slain. That's where the undying body of Asura comes from. Only after Yin Qing's introduction did Li Qingshan understand the significance of Rahu. In the Asura realm, they were equivalent to the princes of Great Xia, and unlike the imperial family of Great Xia, the more powerful they were, the more difficult it was for them to reproduce. As a result, there were extremely few Rahu. There were still very few princes who could achieve anything in Great Xia, as they were still humans at the end of the day, while Rahu was a true god, a natural god. The difference between the two was even greater than the difference between the son of village head Li of Crouching Ox Village and the prince of Great Xia. Yin Qing said, "The black sun and moon are Rahu's insignia. They symbolize the divine force that devours the sun and moon." "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Li Qingshan asked. He thought about how devouring the sun and moon was probably not just a description. He had never thought his Asura field would actually summon such an important figure. No wonder he possessed such power. He had seen an Asura king before, but he was definitely not as powerful as this. "I wasn't certain in the beginning either. After all, as a Rahu, he's just too weak." "Too weak?" Li Qingshan raised his eyebrows. He had crippled Dumo Hun, who was wielding the Forsaken Celestial Sword, with a single move. This was still too weak. A god's descendant was really shameless. However, when he thought about his own 9 transformations of the demons and gods, he felt that it was not a problem. He didn't have the right to criticize others. It had been less than 100 years since he started his cultivation, and he was not far from being invincible in the world. He had also angered all the cultivators in the world. He guessed, maybe he's just too young. He's still a little kid. That's not the case. Your Majesty will know once you see it. All right. Let's go meet this divine son. Li Qingshan and Little and followed Yin Qing to the Asura arena. He couldn't help but reveal a strange expression. The child was still lying on the Asura armament sacrificial altar, looking half dead. He wasn't cultivating, because his aura didn't grow stronger. Instead, it seemed to have grown weaker, and his appearance seemed to have grown a bit older. He immediately understood that the divine child was getting weaker day by day. He's lost his will to fight, Yin Qing quietly reminded. "I see." Li Qingshan nodded slightly and shouted, "Hey, brat, get up." The child was lying on his back, looking at the sky with his eyes listless. When he heard this, he turned around and faced his back to Li Qingshan. "So useless." Li Qingshan then said to Yin Qing, "Can you become an Asura king if you kill him?" Yin Qing was shocked and took a step back. "Your Majesty, don't speak nonsense. It wouldn't be a joke if this Rahu's will to fight was stimulated." Li Qingshan glanced at the child. The child didn't react at all. He smiled and said, "How is it nonsense? If this goes on, this brat will become an Asura commander. He definitely won't be a match for you." Yin Qing couldn't help but be slightly moved as she sized up the child's back. As an assassin, she paid particular attention to taking advantage of others when they were in a precarious situation. If she could obtain the Rahu clan's undying divine blood, then there would be boundless benefits. "It's better if you don't let him try. Even if I become an ordinary Asura, I can crush this kind of trash with one finger," the child said weakly, but he was filled with indescribable confidence. Yin Qing's heart trembled, and she immediately dispelled this thought. "You finally can't help but speak. But in this world, you have to try to know. Don't be afraid, Yin Qing." "He's definitely bluffing," Li Qingshan said. Yin Qing revealed a bitter expression. How could it be so easy to kill a god? The giant eyeball that appeared in the blood-colored vortex was probably for this divine blood. "I'm already tired of fighting and killing. You better not force me." What if I force you? Li Qingshan crouched behind the child, his killing intent ready but not released. He was like a crouching tiger that bared its sharp fangs, ready to bite down at any time. This hypocritical killing intent really makes me want to vomit. Stop with your pointless probing, it's so annoying. Fine, you've seen through me. I'm just curious. Li Qingshan stood up. I, Li Qingshan, will definitely repay favors. You once lent me a hand, so as long as you stay in my territory, I will naturally protect you. No one will be able to harm a single hair on your head. The child tilted his head slightly and glanced out of the corner of his eye. Li Qingshan's expression was calm and firm. But with just the cultivation of 3 heavenly tribulations, he actually said that he would protect him. This was simply a huge joke. However, when it came from his mouth, it had a convincing power. Moreover, this fellow had clearly seen one of the countless eyes that were spying on him. You don't owe me anything. What's your name? Li Qingshan asked. The child withdrew his gaze and said nothing. You don't want to say? Fine, but for convenience's sake, I'll give you a name. Speaking of names, ha ha ha. Li Qingshan's eyes suddenly lit up, and he let out an arrogant laugh. Little An blinked, knowing that he was going to use his naming talent again. Li Qingshan paced back and forth on the Azura ritual platform, sometimes looking up at the sky, sometimes lowering his head in contemplation. He pinched his chin and pondered for a while. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, and he pointed at the child. I've got it. The sun and the moon are bright, so I'll call you Little Ming. Little Ming. The child squeezed out 2 words from between his teeth. His aura suddenly soared, and he slowly sat up. What do you think? Concise and comprehensive, simple but not simple. You can throw away your original name, right, Little An? Li Qingshan smiled confidently. Yes. Little An nodded seriously. Compared to Ji Shenyu, Little An was indeed more pleasant to the ears. Little An. As if confirming that Li Qingshan did not mean to insult him, Little Ming collapsed on the Azura ritual platform again and hit his head against a rock. Fortunately, you met the current me. Little Ming, if I help you arouse your fighting spirit, can you help me fight a battle? Li Qingshan suddenly asked. If he could have the help of this Azura divine son, his chances of winning against the hungry ghost realm would definitely increase. Qingshan. Chapter 1139. No. Little Ming said resolutely. Then forget it. Li Qingshan did not force it. It was just a test anyway. He studied Little Ming curiously. Just how powerful was he before he lost his will to fight and weakened? At the very least, he could easily crush his current self. He looked up at the blood-red sky. The blood-red swirl that led to the Azura realm was still riddled with cracks. Unlike the demon's cavern in the demon realm, the connection between the Azura field and the Azura realm was not particularly close, so it recovered much more slowly. However, he believed that even if it recovered completely, the owner of the huge eye would not dare to enter so easily and endure the counterattack of the world of the 9 states. This was the greatest reason why he dared to provoke Little Ming and even made a promise. It was also the greatest reason why he could face the demon realm and the hungry ghost realm. Being in this well-named 9 provinces was admittedly a kind of restraint, but it was also the greatest protection, allowing him to not have to face the powerhouses of the wider world. However, at this moment, after reaching the 5th layer of the Phoenix and balancing the transformation of the demonic and divine, he had already touched the edge of the well. He could leap out of the well with just one more step and enter an even vaster and more dangerous world. Whether it was Chengqi, Emperor Li, or the divine child before him, they had only reflected a corner of it. There, the great advantage of the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine would be weakened. His enemies would no longer be just cultivators. There would even be deities, Buddhas, and demons. When he thought of that, he could not help but tremble inside. It was not fear, but indescribable excitement and anticipation. But now, the path to the Azura realm had been severed. Who knew whether the owner of the huge eye would be guarding there? Ascension was the only way. As the ultimate goal of all cultivators in the world, the problem now was, How to take the final step. And where would the final step lead to? The first problem had trapped countless cultivators in the world. Who knew how many geniuses had stopped here? Even the golden cicada spirit king had been stuck at this step for many years. This was different from regular tribulations. Instead, it was to completely transcend this world. During the process of transforming into the spirit turtle to suppress the demon's cavern, Li Qingshan had already discussed this with the Banyan Tree King. The Banyan Tree King, who wanted to transform into a well, had given a relatively detailed explanation. The Banyan Tree King said, "You actually have the same mother. Are we long-lost brothers?" Under the shade of the tree, the spirit turtle opened its eyes and looked at the luxuriant tree with a rather strange gaze. "No, I'm talking about this world. She was the mother of all living beings in this world. Everything we have, whether it's the soul or the body, comes from it." Although on the surface, every living creature seemed to be an independent individual. But from the very first moment, he had already established a close connection with this world. In the process of cultivation, this connection will become even closer. We are all favored by the heavens. Oh. The so-called cultivation is like a baby absorbing nutrients from its mother through the umbilical cord. Li Qingshan seemed to have understood something. That's right. The more pampered a child is, the more they won't allow their child to leave them. And when would a child be willing to leave their mother? The Banyan Tree King's voice was filled with deep emotions, like a child longing for home. His vow to become a god of the 9 provinces was not just for ambition. I don't think so. At our level of cultivation, we've already condensed a tremendous amount of spiritual energy from this world. I'm afraid that the world's will is unwilling to lose this portion of power, so it'll pull and tie us down. It'd rather we die here and return everything to this world than let us leave. If the world is the mother, then all ascenders are unfilial children. Li Qingshan did not agree. His soul did not originate from this world, and he was someone who had even resolutely abandoned his home. Naturally, he could not understand the Banyan Tree King's feelings towards this world. That deep and unfathomable world's will was probably something only the Banyan Tree King could touch. Of course, it's not wrong to understand it this way. However, the power of mother is something that even deities have to stop. If it's really so selfish, how can there be ascenders? Moreover, there will definitely be a pulling force, but there will also be a repulsive force. Otherwise, with just our own strength, how can we break through the boundaries and ascend to another world? There's no harm in treating this as a test. A capable child will be able to bring the blessings of mother to a faraway place. Li Qingshan pondered for a moment. I apologize. After all, this esteemed mother has never asked me for anything. There's no need to apologize. This is where your advantage lies, and it's also a very important step. Severing your attachment to this world, I believe that even fellow Daoist Golden Cicada, who wholeheartedly wants to ascend, has this attachment in his heart. This is also unavoidable. Li Qingshan nodded. Just like an ordinary person leaving their home for the first time, it was inevitable that they would have feelings of attachment. However, he had already left a world before. Although he was not the proud son of heaven of that world, he had once been captivated by it. As for you, you have no attachment to this world. You can be considered a natural-born unfilial son. Banyan Tree King laughed. This world can only be considered a stepmother. Although she treats me well, she can't compare to my birth mother. Li Qingshan laughed. The transmigration experience had already brought him very little benefit, so much so that he didn't even need to carefully conceal it. However, he didn't expect that there would be such benefits. Without the obstruction of the mind, all that's left is power. I believe that to you, this won't be a problem. Li Qingshan was very confident. As long as he spent some effort and stabilized his current cultivation, he would basically be ready to ascend. However, your problem isn't the ascension itself, but the bet with Cheongqi, and how to ascend to the same world as Little and Banyan Tree King's words exposed Li Qingshan's greatest worry. Once he ascended to a higher world, the 500-year promise with Cheongqi would definitely be accelerated, and he would very likely have to face it alone. What are the worlds you can ascend to? Apart from the 6 realms of Sazra, there's only the demon domain. There are no other possibilities. If it weren't for the repeated invasions of the demon domain, there would only be the 6 realms of Sazra. The 6 realms of Sazra traverse the various worlds, omnipresent. Even if sentient beings don't ascend, their souls will return to it after death. Then what determines which world you ascend to? Don't ascend to the demon domain. That'll be bad luck. Race, cultivation method, and personality all affect you. It's hard to say whether it's a coincidence or not. You practice the demon war statuary and your demonic nature is not weak, but you're fundamentally different from demon folk. You reject the laws of the demon domain very much, so you basically won't enter the demon domain. Chapter 1140. Where does the Tree King think I will ascend to? Little Anne's voice suddenly interrupted their conversation. I can't judge either. The cultivation technique you cultivate is very peculiar. It lies between life and death, Buddha and demon. You were originally a human, so the hell path, hungry ghost path, heavenly path, and human path might all be open to you. Because of that twisted vow, the demon domain might even accept you. However, the Asura path and the demonic beast path are the most impossible. The former is because of one's nature, while the latter is because of one's race. You have no fighting spirit, so you are not a member of the demonic beast clan. We have to ascend to the same world, no matter what Li Qingshan said. Even if it means reaching the hungry ghost realm, the Banyan Tree King asked. I won't hesitate, Li Qingshan said decisively, but we can always make a compromise and choose a world that we can both go to. I think the human path and the heavenly path are both good choices. However, it is the world that chooses you to ascend, not you who chooses the world. Moreover, it is best for you to accept the world's choice. Unlike the 9 prefectures world, that kind of high-level worlds will become very obvious. In a suitable world, no matter if it's cultivation or battle, it'll be like having the help of the heavens, and you'll get twice the results with half the effort. It can be said that those who follow will prosper, and those who go against will perish. Li Qingshan looked at Luo Hu Xiaoming in front of him. This was the most realistic example. An Asura who had lost his will to fight was probably as bad as the living in the hungry ghost realm. The Banyan Tree King's last words reverberated in her ears. It's better to forget each other than to help each other in times of hardship. You have already cultivated together to such a level. If you take one more step forward, it will be a vast world. Why do you insist on relying on each other? I'm going to the demonic beast path. This was Little Anne's answer. In the path of demonic beasts, groups of demonic beasts roamed freely. 10,000 beasts have no control. Legend has it that it is a world full of spirituality, although there is also the cruelty of natural selection and the law of the jungle. However, Li Qingshan believed that it was the most suitable world for him. The Asura path could only satisfy the tiger demon's desire to fight, while the heavenly Tao repelled the demonic nature. The human path might be able to allow his divinity and demonic nature to coexist, but he had already tasted the feeling of hiding in the crowd as a monster. It was definitely not as good as the freedom of being a pure monster. Li Qingshan didn't say anything else. He nodded at Little Anne and said, "All right. Then let's go to the demonic beast road." The two of them smiled at each other and made their decision. Even though I don't have any clues for now, I don't care how the world chooses, and how free we are in the martial world. Of course, we have to go where we want to go together. The Banyan Tree King was also speechless. He did not know whether to be happy or to sigh. Come. Li Qingshan waved his hand. The blade gleamed brightly and landed in his hand. He swung it around and held it horizontally in front of him. The ending flower frenzied saber was covered with sword marks. You've worked hard in this battle. Mage. This is more like it. But I'll have to trouble you to place me on the Asura altar of armaments and sacrifice some scrap metal, the frenzied flower blade said proudly. Other than sacrificing weapons, the Asura altar of armaments also had the ability to repair and even strengthen weapons. Many weapons followed their masters and became famous in the Asura path step by step. No problem. Li Qingshan readily agreed. Unknowingly, The frenzied flower blade had already completely approved of him. What a good slave. A strange voice came from behind little Anne. It was the forsaken immortal sword spirit. What nonsense are you spouting? The frenzied flower blade was furious. It had a primitive hatred for swords. I don't want to talk to slaves, the forsaken immortal sword spirit said. My blade master won, and your sword master lost and died. You didn't abide by your duty, and that's why you ended up like this. That's not my sword master. Moreover, a weapon will never lose. It will always be held in the hands of the victor, just like now. Qingshan, I've already comprehended the way of the sword. I'll get you a better weapon. Little Anne pulled out the forsaken immortal sword and stabbed it into the Azura altar of armaments. Nonsense. My way of the sword is broad and profound. How could you comprehend it in such a short time? The forsaken immortal sword spirit shouted. You really don't need it? Li Qingshan asked. Most of the way of the sword can only be used with this sword. This sword is enough for me. Little Anne gripped the Buddha slaying sword. The skull on the hilt revealed a sinister smile. The Buddha slaying sword was her origin sword. Not only was it powerful, but it could also be tempered and improved. She didn't have to worry about being betrayed. Naturally, it was 100 times stronger than the forsaken immortal sword. The blade and the sword fell silent. No matter how strong and sharp a weapon was, it was still an external object. If it wasn't needed, it would be replaced and abandoned. No, I don't want to go to the Azura realm, the forsaken immortal sword spirit shouted. As the sword of the 5 absolutes immortal, its understanding of the Azura realm was no less than Li Qingshan's. If it went to the Azura realm's armory, it would definitely be reforged into an Azura divine weapon. This was a devastating blow to the forsaken immortal sword spirit, who wanted to become its master. What a joke. Are you afraid? The frenzied flower sword spirit mocked. Weren't you also abandoned? Do you think that stupid Li Qingshan would need 2 blades? I knew this day would come, but I didn't think it would be so soon. The frenzied flower sword spirit's voice was low, but it rose again. All right, kid, send me back to the armory. I'm sick of it. And so, Li Qingshan stabbed the frenzied flower sword into the Azura altar of armaments. Hey, little Ming, make way. Oh! Luo Hu Xiaoming flipped his body over and over again. Just like that, he rolled off the Azura altar of armaments. Li Qingshan shook his head. He really had no fighting spirit at all. With one hand on the hilt, he activated the Azura altar of armaments and said to the frenzied flower sword spirit, I don't have any scrap metal. I'll make do with this sword. You! The frenzied flower sword spirit was stunned. He felt that not only did Li Qingshan not use her as a sacrifice, but he was also preparing to repair her and strengthen her. I originally wanted to change my blade, but seeing that you've always been obedient, I'll see how you perform. Li Qingshan laughed aloud. Although he was rather eager to see just what kind of powerful weapon he would obtain after sacrificing the End Wildflower Blade and the Forsaken Immortal Sword, he still chose to strengthen the End Wildflower Blade a step further. P2E, obedient my ass, the frenzied flower sword spirit cursed happily. If you want to strengthen this blade, I advise you to do it step by step. Use some ordinary weapons to strengthen it. Otherwise, it will break. Luo Hu Xiaoming's lazy voice came from below the Azura altar of armaments. Is that so? Li Qingshan scratched his head. This pattern was very familiar to him. Some ancient and terrifying memories surfaced, and he couldn't help but shiver. He hurriedly gripped the hilt of the blade tightly, as if the forsaken flower sword spirit would break if he was not careful. It's okay. Come on, I won't break. The frenzied flower sword spirit shouted. Only by surpassing the limits of strength could the essence be improved. Otherwise, it would only have a layer of light on it and become sharper. In battle, it would be quickly consumed. Let me think it over. Chapter 1141. You know. Li Qingshan's eyes lit up. From the cursive sword calligraphy to the abandoned immortal sword, the various things left behind by the 5 absolutes immortal had influenced his entire cultivation process. There were good and bad ones, and some had even threatened his life. However, this made him more and more curious about the 5 absolutes immortal. He was clearly a cultivator, but he was called an immortal. This in itself was very unusual. Forget about a cultivator who had gone through 3 heavenly tribulations, even a cultivator who had gone through 4 or 5 heavenly tribulations would not be qualified to be called that. Furthermore, Brother Ox had praised him. Perhaps the legends were true, and he really was a banished immortal. Li Qingshan no longer cared about ordinary treasures, but the treasures left behind by the 5 absolutes immortal were not ordinary. The core treasure of the sword tomb was the abandoned immortal sword. Disregarding the sword soul's twisted personality, in terms of power alone, it was probably the best sword in the world. The core treasure of the painting tomb was definitely a painting scroll, and it was very likely that the Dragon King of the Sea was drawn on it. If he could plunder it before he ascended, it would not be a waste of his cultivation. I was that old guy's sword after all. When he sealed his 4th tomb, I watched with my own eyes. I didn't think that I would be sealed as well. Damn it. The abandoned immortal sword soul was still angry at the mention of this, and it emitted waves of murderous intent. This can be considered as abandonment, so you changed your name to the abandoned immortal sword. I didn't expect you to have such deep feelings for the previous owner. Li Qingshan chuckled. Shut up. I want to tear that old guy to pieces. You're the one who should shut up. Little and flicked his finger, and the blade vibrated. The abandoned immortal sword's soul snorted angrily. However, it did not dare to be rude again. The 5 absolutes immortal's secret tomb is floating in the void. The Dragon King of the Sea's main body is in the painting tomb, and he can't freely enter and exit it. So what if you know? Li Qingshan rubbed his chin. Don't compare me to that pseudo-dragon. I've already fused with the sword catacomb. What's so hard about traveling through space? The forsaken immortal sword spirit said proudly. Li Qingshan couldn't help but look at Yin Qing. Yin Qing said, although I can hide in the void, my strength is still lacking. I can't freely travel through the void, and it's difficult for me to break through the sealed region. Li Qingshan nodded. It was no wonder that for so many years, the 5 extreme secret graves had always been a legend. If that was the case, then the forsaken immortal sword was the key to opening the 5 extreme secret graves. All right, I'll trust you this once. You have to swear. Don't sacrifice me, the forsaken immortal sword said. That depends on your performance. If things went smoothly, of course, I will repay you. Otherwise, who can be bound by an oath? Li Qingshan was not willing to make an oath with such a sword. Even if it was just words. Hey, kid, you said you were going to strengthen me. Frenzied Blade Soul was unhappy. Why are you in such a hurry? Follow me into battle. Are you afraid that there won't be any good sacrifices? Let me repair your wounds first, just in case you run out of energy in the future. Li Qingshan patted the hilt of his blade and comforted the end of the frenzied blade. He considered where he could find some weapons to sacrifice. If it's just repair, these weapons should be enough. Little and swung the Bloodsea banner, and with a series of clangs, countless demonic artifacts landed on the Azura altar of armaments, forming a small mountain. Although most of them were not of particularly high quality, the quantity was startling. They were the spoils of war she had obtained from powering the Bloodsea banner and devouring the demonfolk army. That's enough. Little Anne was always so timely. Li Qingshan immediately activated the Azura altar of armaments. A streak of red light rushed into the air, and all of the demonic artifacts melted away in the red light. Thick liquid surged out from the center of the Azura altar of armaments. It seemed like molten metal, but it also seemed like a form of energy. It gradually enveloped the end of the frenzied blade, gathering around the wounds and gaps and beginning to repair them. Li Qingshan ordered Yin Qing to stand guard there before leaving the Azura field with little Anne. Before he left, he glanced at Luo Huxiaoming again. He lay below the Azura altar of armaments, gazing at the sky without moving at all. He seemed extremely gloomy. A divine child of Azura suffering from depression? The world sure is vast. Nothing is too strange. The autumn wind rustled. A sword flew through the plains. The withered grass parted, leaving behind a long trail before suddenly rushing into the sky again. Li Xiaoyaro rode his sword as the wind blew against his face. He was filled with delight. Just recently, he had undergone the heavenly tribulation in the Clear River Prefecture and become a Foundation Establishment cultivator. The battle on Great Buddha Mountain had already come to an end. Various pieces of information had returned to the Clear River Prefecture. Although Li Qingshan had told him to stay away from the Sword Collection Palace, he could not help but go back and take a look. That was the starting point of his dream of becoming a swordsman. There were many loving seniors and juniors there. Now that the situation in the Green Province had stabilized, and the Demon Plague and Locust Plague had been suppressed and eliminated, he believed there would not be any danger. Although the Sword Collection Peak no longer hung high in the sky, the surrounding scenery gradually grew familiar. Heaven's Reliance Peak flickered on the horizon. The Sword Collection Palace was already very close. Flying over a mountain on his sword, two familiar figures stood at the top. Their purple and green robes drifted in the wind as they gazed at the Sword Collection Palace from afar. Senior Uncle Fu, Senior Uncle Yu. Li Xiaoyaro recognized the two seniors who wielded the 10 renowned swords with a single glance. He leapt off the sword and sheathed it in a single stroke. Xiaoyao, you're fine. That's fantastic. Yu Zijian turned around. When Li Xiaoyaro saw her smiling face filled with concern, he could not help but feel his heart warm up. However, he also discovered that her bright, beautiful face was tinged with some melancholy, while Senior Uncle Fu did not turn around the entire time as if she was in a daze. Fu Qingjin's temperament was renowned in the Sword Collection Palace, but Li Xiaoyaro did not mind. And, after practicing the sword scripture of heaven and earth, he found the world to be even more spacious. Small matters were not worth dwelling on. However, when he made his way over and followed Fu Qingjin's gaze, he could not help but widen his eyes in shock. Even if the Sword Collection Palace had been reduced to a mess, he would not have been so surprised. However, all he saw was that the damaged structures on the mountain peaks had all been repaired. Smoke curled into the air. In a daze, the Sword Collection Palace did not seem to have suffered any disasters at all. All it lacked was the flashes of light that crisscrossed through the mountains. However, the chanting drifted over from the mountain peaks. A great Buddha was carved on Heaven's Reliance Peak. People who came here for the first time would definitely think this was an ancient sapphire Buddhist temple. Senior Uncle, what's going on? Li Xiaoyaro was dumbfounded. This is the Chan Monastery of Nga. Fu Qingjin finally spoke, but his voice was filled with bitterness. It was the dauntless monk who had led everyone north and rebuilt the Chan Monastery of Nga here. On the top of Heaven's Reliance Peak, the dauntless monk suddenly stopped chanting and emerged from the main hall, gazing towards the south. What are you looking at, Abbot? A young novice monk sweeping the fallen leaves gathered his courage and asked. A few lone geese that have lost their flock. Where? The young novice monk looked around. You're still too young, so you can't see it yet. You'll see it once you grow up. Chapter 1142. The Sword Collection Palace is gone? Li Xiaoyaro murmured. He had a feeling that it was unreal. It seemed that the mountain was still echoing with the noise and laughter of his senior and junior brothers. When he came back to his senses, it was only the ripples of his memory. Unknowingly, his face was already covered with tears. Even if the palace master and the elders colluded with the demon region, many of their companions were innocent. Li Xiaoyao, are you still a disciple of the Sword Collection Palace? Yu Zijian suddenly asked. Yes. Li Xiaoyao answered instinctively. The Sword Collection Palace isn't dead. At the very least, there's still the three of us. Yu Zijian's eyes shone with glistening, violet light. Behind her was the afterglow of the setting sun, interweaving into a colorful glow. But under her influence, it was like the rising sun, full of hope. Fu Qingjin and Li Xiaoyaro were stunned. What was the point of saying this now? If the Sword Collection Palace had been destroyed by enemies, then so be it. They would naturally be motivated to take revenge and restore the Sword Collection Palace's reputation. However, The reality was that the Sword Collection Palace had colluded with the demon domain and dug their own graves. All of their disciples had died below the Sword Collection Peak. Even the Chan Monastery of Devarangi's actions of taking over the Sword Collection Peak could not be faulted. If they continued to call themselves disciples of the Sword Collection Palace, they would basically be asking to be humiliated. Zijian, everything has a beginning and end. When there's a rising sun, there's a setting sun. The Sword Collection Palace is no different. Why must you be so stubborn? Fu Qingjin sighed gently. All he wanted to do was leave his home and wander the world. Yeah, senior uncle. Why don't you return to the Clear River Prefecture and continue cultivating? You can still wield your sword and uphold justice. I was just saying it in passing. I think it's better if I don't become a disciple of the Sword Collection Palace. Li Xiaoyao also shook his head. We can no longer admit that we're disciples of the Sword Collection Palace, but what about our innocent brothers and sisters? He didn't do anything bad. Do I have to be treated as a fool and a bad guy, forever carrying a bad name? Yu Zijian clenched her fists firmly. Her voice trembled as her eyes moistened, but she did not shed any tears. Fu Qingjin shuddered inside. He looked at Yu Zijian deeply. With her gentle nature, the pain she felt must have been much deeper than theirs. Sigh, unknowingly. You've become stronger than I am. Li Xiaoyao was also speechless. His face was full of shame. Yu Zijian shook her head and said apologetically, Sorry, I shouldn't have said something like that. I've made things difficult for you. But I really can't just leave like this. Senior Fu. Thank you for taking care of me all these years. There was also Xiaoyao. You've cultivated bitterly for so many years and finally survived the heavenly tribulation. It's time for you to be free and unfettered. Otherwise, it would be a waste of its name. His smile vanished in a flash before becoming determined again. He gazed at heaven's leaning peak in the distance. I'll pay for the sins that the Sword Collection Palace has committed. Fu Qingjin and Li Xiao looked at her back from afar. Her thin shoulders seemed to bear all the sins and notoriety, a burden that did not belong to her. They could not help but look at each other. Fu Qingjin let out a long sigh. Zijian, oh Zijian, You've really embarrassed the two of us with your actions. Fu Qingjin smiled. I'm not. Yu Zijian waved her hand in a fluster, but she had no idea how to explain herself. You know that I'm just a piece of trash who only knows how to sigh in the ruins. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't even know how to continue living. Please let me go with you. Fu Qingjin bowed slightly. Senior Aunt Yu, I'll continue being a disciple of the Sword Collection Palace. Although I seem to be the only disciple, I definitely won't disappoint you. You don't have to force yourself. I'm not forcing myself. I don't think as much as you do. However, if I become a great swordsman in the future and someone asks me whether I come from the Sword Collection Palace, how should I answer? I might as well just admit it. I'll be able to face my seniors and juniors, and I'll be able to face the sword in my hand. You're fantastic. Yu Zijian cheered and embraced them, diluting her sorrow and melancholy. A snake won't leave without a head. Since the Sword Collection Palace is still standing, there should be a palace lord. Fu Qingjin smiled. Yeah. Although there's only a single disciple, there still needs to be a palace lord. Li Xiaoyao looked at Yu Zijian with a smile. Yu Zijian hesitated. All right, I'll be the palace lord. As a result, the position of the palace lord who had once shaken up the Green Province was decided in a few words. Greetings, palace lord. Fu Qingjin and Li Xiaoyao bowed towards her together. They were both serious, without the slightest disrespect. Yu Zijian wanted to dodge instinctively, but she still stood firmly and accepted it rather uncomfortably. Palace Lord, if we want to rebuild the Sword Collection Palace, we'll probably have to find another land of spiritual energy. Fortunately, there's plenty of empty land in the Green Province now, so it won't be difficult to find, said Li Xiaoyao. I know a few suitable places. We can investigate them, said Fu Qingjin. No, let's go to Heaven's Leaning Peak first. Yu Zijian pointed at the mountains in the distance. Li Xiaoyao was taken aback. Why were they going to Heaven's Leaning Peak at a time like this? Were they going to take back Heaven's Leaning Peak from the monks? That was impossible. Though, it said that Senior Aunt Yu is extremely familiar with my second uncle. If she has his support, there's some hope. However, Fu Qingjin seemed to understand something. The dauntless monk turned around and said to the young monk, "Pass down my orders. Prepare to receive the master of the Sword Collection Palace." "Yes, Abbot." The young monk tossed aside his broom and jogged all the way to the grand hall. A while later, a bell rang out. The entire mountain was filled with bells and drums. The monks gathered, all filled with curiosity. Didn't the master of the Sword Collection Palace die a long time ago? And, even if he was still alive, he would be a mortal enemy of the Chan Monastery of Nga, so why was he still receiving him so politely? Yu Zijian, Li Xiaoyaro, and Li Xiaoyaro ascended the mountain on foot, which left the monks even more surprised. Wasn't their cultivation a little too weak? And, apart from the nameless junior at the very back, they did not even have a sword on them, yet they were still sword cultivators? Li Xiaoyaro walked along the familiar mountain path, surrounded by the monks. He felt extremely uneasy and uncomfortable inside. However, he noticed that Yu Zijian's expression became sterner and sterner. She was no longer as gentle as usual. She really did possess the bearing of a palace lord. Did she want to negotiate with the dauntless monk? Reaching the top of the mountain, a tall, stern-faced monk stood there. Li Xiaoyao's cultivation was too low in the past, so his senses were extremely limited. Only now did he understand what a great cultivator was like. Their bearing was basically like a mountain. He could not help but hold his breath. Then, he thought about how his second uncle had glared at him. He thought about how this monk could not be even more powerful, which was why he relaxed slightly. However, the thought of returning the Heaven's Leaning Peak had vanished. Master of the Sword Collection Palace, Yu Zijian, along with elder Fu Qingjin and disciple Li Xiaoyao, greets the dauntless abbot. "Please come into the hall, Palace Lord." The dauntless monk looked at her in some surprise and gave her sufficient politeness. However, Yu Zijian turned him down, expressing that she was not a guest. Afterwards, she publicly apologized to the Chan Monastery of Nga as the master of the Sword Collection Palace. She also handed over all the mountains including the Heaven's Leaning Peak to the Chan Monastery of Nga as compensation. The sun set, and the sunlight dispersed. Afterwards, it was a long night. Chapter 1144. Li Qingshan lazily lay on a banyan leaf that was as wide as a boat. The autumn sun shone on his belly, making him feel slightly tipsy. Of course, the hundreds of jars of wine he drank might be the main culprit, but what did it matter? A gentle breeze blew, making him feel comfortable. "Qingshan, you have been lying here for 10 days. The banyan tree king's voice echoed in the cloud-like canopy. "Please raise it a little higher." "Okay, that's it." Li Qingshan changed the angle of the banyan leaf to make it easier for him to bask in the sun. Suddenly, he realized the banyan tree king's words. He tilted his head and said, 10 days? Is it that long? It seems like I just drank my first cup." As he spoke, he grabbed a wine jar and gulped it down. With a casual toss, the wine jar disappeared into a cloud mountain in the sky. Then, he lay down comfortably and burped. In a half-singing and half-singing manner, he said, "Drinking and singing, life is short. How can I solve my worries? Only do Kang. I didn't expect the legendary demon king of the North Moon to be so decadent." There was a flash of white light in the depths of the mountain, descending from the sky and hovering above the canopy. It turned into a woman in white. Her skin was as white as milk, and her beautiful face gave off a sense of holiness. She looked down at Li Qingshan from above, but the most eye-catching part about her was the pair of pure white wings on her back. "Angel?" Li Qingshan was confused. Oh, mutant. He vaguely recalled this race. The word mutant made the woman in white frown. She corrected, "It's a god. You must be crazy." Li Qingshan laughed loudly, the canopy swaying. The woman's expression changed. She actually felt a majestic pressure from this laughter. This Li Qingshan really lived up to his reputation. She was a little more respectful. I am Baijie from the Cloud God Nation. I am the Golden Deacon of the palace. I am here on the orders of my king to invite you to the God Nation. What is your name? Li Qingshan was stunned. Baijie. The woman proudly repeated. Good name. The corners of Li Qingshan's mouth curled up slightly as he scrutinized Baijie from head to toe. Baijie felt inexplicably unhappy, but she suppressed the disgust in her heart and said, Please come with me. I'm not going, Li Qingshan said. You actually refused. This is an invitation from the city amongst the clouds. Do you know how many people want to ascend to the city amongst the clouds but are unable to? Baijie said in disbelief. Go away, you're blocking me from the sun. Li Qingshan waved his hand impatiently. Okay, I hope you won't regret it. Baijie turned into a white light and disappeared into the horizon. Li Qingshan watched them leave as he drank. Why did you refuse? Asked the banyan tree king. Stop pretending. Can't you feel it? Li Qingshan suddenly had a flash of inspiration. A big banyan tree pretending to be strong, ha 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 ha. After grasping the spirit turtle transformation and comprehending the laws of the world, his senses had become sharper and sharper. The invitation this time was not out of the hospitality of the minority brothers. There was clearly hidden danger. Because of this, you shouldn't have refused, said the banyan tree king. With Li Qingshan's personality, why would he be afraid of any danger? I don't want a woman right now, nor do I want an enemy. Sigh. You seem to really don't want me to stay here. What do you think? The banyan tree king countered with a question. Even the sky darkened. The alcohol that Li Qingshan had been drinking these days was all brewed by him. Li Qingshan was still picky about the taste, so he used the laws of the world to make these wines reach the effect of being aged for 100 years or even 1,000 years. Many cultivators would not be able to see so much precious spiritual wine in their entire lives. This guy drank several hundred jars like drinking water. Li Qingshan was like a person who lived at home eating off his elders. When he had nothing to do, he would drink a little and go crazy. Obviously, the elders could not stand it. Didn't I do it to protect little Anne? Li Qingshan spread out his hands. Little Anne was still cultivating under the tree, refining the white bone arcane artifacts again. She doesn't need you to protect her. The banyan tree king exposed his excuse without holding back at all. He asked, Don't you have the will to ascend to the 9 heavens? There's no hurry, there's no hurry. The drunkenness in Li Qingshan's eyes vanished, and he recovered his clarity. He stared at the distant sky. He did not just lie there to slack off and rest. His cultivation of the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine had reached a relatively stable level. Drinking so much of this spiritual wine was also preparation for further cultivation. Fine then. I was just afraid that your will would weaken, so I gave you a reminder. Do you still want to drink? Heh, I won't drink anymore, or I'll really fall out with you. Li Qingshan leapt up and cracked his neck. Tell me about the featherfolk. The featherfolk are one of the 7 great other folk races. Their surname is Bai, and they're proud and reserved. They claim to be true descendants of gods and look down on other races, including other folk. As for humans and diamonds, there's no need to even mention them. They've established a divine kingdom in the sky called the City Amongst the Clouds, which is different from the divine kingdoms of other folk on earth. It's said that from birth until death, their feet never touch the soil. What a weirdo. Don't they know what era this is? Didn't they deal with these guys when Great Shia was founded? Li Qingshan asked curiously. The featherfolk are one of the races that have been affected the least by war. Although they possess extraordinary strength, they naturally loathe conflict and killing, so there's very little internal strife. Ever since the age of the Divine Kingdom, they've rarely involved themselves in battles on the surface. They'll only take action when demonfolk invade en masse. They've all turned the tables at crucial moments, and they've been viewed as a decisive force against the demon domain. When Great Shia was founded, they maintained neutrality the entire time. After that, they seemed to have signed some sort of agreement, and they did not engage in war. After that, traces of them rarely appeared. Most of the city amongst the clouds are stationed in the eastern cloud province, or they drift across the ocean. The Banyan Tree King demonstrated his vast knowledge once again. It sounds like they're a race filled with greatness, light, and justice. If you add in freedom and democracy, they'll basically be ungovernable. Though, why would a race like that come to make trouble for me? Perhaps the invasion of the demon domain has drawn their attention. As for why they've come to find you, that's difficult to guess. You were right to turn down the invitation. After 5,000 years of development, the Featherfolk's strength is probably only second to Great Shia. They really can't be underestimated. Li Qingshan deeply agreed. Other folk possessed extraordinary talent in the first place. If they expanded on a larger scale, there would definitely be quite a few third heavenly tribulation cultivators. However, as long as he did not go to the city amongst the clouds, the Featherfolk could not do anything to him, so there was no need for him to worry too much. It's time for me to go for a walk. Li Qingshan extended his hand into the azura field and pulled out his end's wildflower blade. The wounds on it had all recovered. It shone brightly and seemed even sharper. Before he ascended, there were still many things he had to settle. Dragon King of the Sea, I'm coming. At the same time, a streak of white light shot into the palace hidden in the clouds thousands of kilometers away. He turned it down? Yes. How's his strength? It's no small matter, but he's nowhere near invincible, much less his majesty. Chapter 1145. On a lonely island in the Ink Sea, Chu Danqing was focused on painting. The Dragon King of the Sea stood with his hands behind his back, giving him guidance from time to time. Suddenly, he looked back, and a pair of dragon eyes appeared in his blank eyes. Danqing, let's stop here for today. Yes, master. Leave the Ink Sea. Ah! Chu Danqing was shocked. He's here. Do we really have to fight? We have to fight. The Dragon King of the Sea walked out of the house. His gaze crossed the sea and met a pair of scarlet eyes. Li Qingshan's back was facing the setting sun. He stood on a black reef. The sea breeze carried the scent of ink, and his scarlet hair fluttered in the wind. Filled with curiosity, he bent down like a big cat. He did not know what the ink sea water tasted like. Hey, you over there, you can't drink the seawater. A fisherman was driving his fishing boat back to shore. When he saw this, he could not help but shout a warning. Li Qingshan raised his head and glanced at the fisherman. He saw that the scarlet hair was not dyed red by the setting sun. The pair of scarlet eyes seemed to contain magic, causing him to keep quiet out of fear. Li Qingshan still ended up drinking a mouthful of seawater. The bitter and salty taste spread through his mouth, and he gulped it down with a gulp. He extended his blackened tongue and muttered to himself, "It really is disgusting, but the taste is rather special." He then waved at the fisherman. "Hey, brother, go home quickly. The storm is coming." "Ah, okay." The fisherman came back to his senses and quickly rowed the boat. Li Qingshan took out a scroll and unfurled it. It was the 3 Absolutes calligraphy personally drawn by the 5 Absolutes Immortal. He looked at it carefully again. From the time he obtained the first cursive sword calligraphy in the Black Wind stronghold until now, everything related to it appeared in his mind. In the end, he threw it into the Ink Sea. The 3 Absolutes calligraphy floated on the burning sea and gradually sank into the sea. The sharp, sword-like handwriting on the scroll gradually melted in the Ink Sea. Li Qingshan smiled. The Dragon King of the Sea did not refuse. This was good. He looked back at the fisherman who was rowing the boat. He couldn't help but shake his head. Leaping up, he put his hands together and shouted, "People of Morhai Sea, listen up, the storm is coming." The sound waves swept across the sea. It spread throughout the entire Ink Sea. It reverberated. It was like an oracle. Countless people revealed expressions of shock, and then began to row their boats with all their might away from the ocean. Qingshan. Chu Danqing heard this voice. He suddenly abandoned the Dragon King of the Sea and flew towards the source of the sound. Not long after he left the small island, a dragon's roar resounded behind him. The island was engulfed by the raging waves. A majestic black dragon was entrenched on the island, its sharp dragon claws gripping the mountain rocks. Its huge body was faintly discernible in the huge waves. It raised its head and roared, as if it was responding to Li Qingshan. Sigh. Chu Danqing frowned and let out a long sigh. He increased his speed, but the churning of the seawater below was already spreading towards the shore at an even faster speed. The sky quickly darkened. The multicolored light dimmed and disappeared. The sky was dark and gloomy. A huge wave slammed against the black reef. The splashing waves landed on Li Qingshan's face. His emotions were like the sea in front of him, faintly beginning to churn. A black dot flew over from the sea. Li Qingshan waved his hand. Danqing, long time no see. Qingshan, don't fight. I'm begging you. Chu Danqing landed in front of the black Qingshan, grabbed his shoulder, and said while panting. The disciple of the Dragon King of the Sea should not be begging others so easily. Li Qingshan was still smiling, his fighting spirit burning even more fiercely. I'm not only doing this for my master, but also for my friends. I don't want to see anything happen to either of you. Chu Danqing tried to persuade him. No one will die. Your master's true body is not here, is it? Li Qingshan, do you think you will win? The deep voice of the Dragon King of the Sea came from the sea, as if the entire sea was speaking. Of course. Li Qingshan was full of confidence, even if this was the home ground of the Dragon King of the Sea. In this battle, there would be no helpers, and there would be no Nirvana rebirth. It was just him and the Dragon King of the Sea. This was no longer for revenge, but to test himself to see if he had the power to surpass the 10 demon kings. Arrogant. With an angry roar, the shadow of a black dragon soared into the sky. The rolling mountains in the sea seemed to be about to connect with the dark clouds that were pressing down. The dragon's shadow danced between the clouds and the sea. Bang! Rocks flew everywhere, and the reef under Li Qingshan's feet was crushed. He curled his lips. So stingy. Qingshan. Chu Danqing wanted to persuade him again, but Li Qingshan suddenly looked straight into his eyes and said with a straight face, "Go away." Chu Danqing let go of his hand involuntarily. Li Qingshan patted his shoulder and said with a smile, "If you have nothing better to do, come and paint a picture." Chu Danqing watched blankly as Li Qingshan stepped into the rolling sea of ink. In the blink of an eye, he was swallowed by the sea and disappeared. Then, a huge mountain rushed out of the sea of ink and stood between heaven and earth. A pair of curved horns tore through the clouds, filled with an unyielding fighting spirit. A pair of gorgeous and dazzling wings with a wingspan of thousands of feet glowed with the brilliance of divinity. Waves crashed against the huge mountain, but they could not move it at all. On the contrary, the surrounding seawater gradually calmed down and became as smooth as a mirror. Li Qingshan stepped forward and advanced toward the center of the sea of ink. Everywhere he went, the violent sea became calm, forming a great contrast with the surrounding turbulent waves. The cold seawater hit his face, and Chu Danqing suddenly quivered. He flew high into the sky and spread out a piece of white paper in front of him. He held the weasel brush tightly in his right hand and stared at the sea. At this moment, Jiyu Yangying and Sai Bao rushed over and stared at the sea of ink. "Sister, they really want to fight," Sai Bao exclaimed. "Who can stop them? Let's just watch." Jiyu Yangying spread her hands. "Fighting is good. It's all your fault for making me go into seclusion. I missed a lot of good shows." Sai Bao was extremely excited, her thick eyebrows flying high. On the other hand, Jiyu Yangying had a helpless expression. "Sister, who do you think will win?" Sai Bao took out a bag of dried fruits and ate one, crushing it together with the core. "Theoretically, no one can defeat the Dragon King of the Sea in the Ink Sea," Jiyu Yangying said. "But he's always out of theory, right? I really didn't expect that this brat would be so strong now." Sai Bao thought of the battles she had missed and couldn't help but feel regret and anticipation. The tall statue of the first king of Chu pressed down on his sword and looked at the magnificent sea of ink. He also seemed to fall into silence. In the majestic South Hub city behind him, the cultivators climbed up the city walls to watch the battle, but they only saw the sky and earth change color. It was a shocking scene. Li Qingshan was about to reach the center of the ink sea. The waves became more and more violent, and the seawater around him rippled. The dragon's roar was faintly discernible in the wind and waves, but it never stopped and slowly wrapped around him. Chapter 1146. Break. The clouds split, and the sea split. Li Qingshan suddenly turned around and met the eyes of a dragon head. Its jagged dragon horns pointed to the sky, and its ink-black manner danced in the wind. At the same time, it let out an angry roar. The tiger's roar and dragon's roar shook the entire ink sea. The wind suddenly became 10 times stronger, stirring up the world into chaos. At the top of South Hub City, the cultivators hurriedly cast spells to resist the strong wind blowing against their faces. The strong smell of ink and blood still made them feel dizzy, and they looked at the magnificent sea with fear. This was the power of the North Moon Demon King and the Dragon King of the Sea. Li Qingshan had just raised his long blade when he was thrown into the sea by a strong force. His vision was filled with the vigorous dragon's body, flowing like a great river, coiling around the majestic body of the demon god. It was as if the ink sea was pressing on his body. His limbs were in pain, and he was firmly locked by the sharp dragon claws, sinking into the dark ink sea. The ink sea seemed bottomless, sinking endlessly. He heard the deep voice of the Dragon King of the Sea mixed with the dragon's roar. Li Qingshan, this is the biggest mistake you've made in your life. Maybe the victory at Great Buddha Mountain made you arrogant, and this will be your burial ground. The dragon's teeth intersected, blood splattered, and he felt a sharp pain in his neck. These words sound very familiar. Also, arrogance is just your illusion. Li Qingshan's smile turned into rage, and the tiger stripes quickly spread, forming a king character on his forehead. The dragon's claws and teeth pierced deeper and deeper into his body, and the pain was like pouring oil on fire, turning his rage into rage. The wings of the wind god suddenly expanded, breaking the water for 1,000 miles. Bang! A red tiger leaped out of the ink sea, and its long tail curled around the long blade. It quickly swept across the surface of the sea and slashed the dragon's body. Wherever the blade passed, huge arc-shaped waves thousands of feet high appeared on the surface of the sea, like a curtain rising into the sky, covering the dragon and tiger. The curtain rose and fell. The Dragon King was cut in half, and the red tiger broke free, proudly standing between heaven and earth. Good, strong. Sai Bao was dazzled. Although she was a princess and had experienced hundreds of battles, a battle of this level was simply unheard of. Forget about the Dragon King of the Sea. What shocked her even more was that Li Qingshan did not seem to be at a disadvantage in such an absolutely disadvantageous situation. Instead, he seemed to be winning. This is just the beginning. Jiyu Yangying said. If that was all the Dragon King in the Ink Sea was capable of, then he would not be able to do anything. Then she wouldn't have come to watch this battle at all. Indeed, when the two halves of the Dragon King of the Sea fell into the sea, they turned into 2 giant dragons and soared into the sky. They were no smaller than they were just now. They spiraled and flew toward Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan's figure turned, and the saber light was like a wheel. A huge ring-shaped wave was set off in the sea. The Dragon King of the Sea was cut in half again, but in the blink of an eye, he turned into 4 giant dragons. Not only did his aura not weaken, but it also increased. Saber lights tore through the pitch-black sky like lightning, cutting the Dragon King of the Sea again and again. However, the dragon shadows between the sea and the sky increased. They surrounded Li Qingshan, as if he was in a deep quagmire. The more he struggled, the deeper he sank. How can he win? Sai Bao's heart trembled. She could not distinguish the true form of the Dragon King of the Sea. Or perhaps there was no such thing as true form. The Ink Sea was the Dragon King. The Dragon King was the Ink Sea. If the Ink Sea did not die, the Dragon King would not die. It can only be considered a neutral game, girl. Watch carefully. This might be your family's greatest enemy, Jiyu Yangying said. My family's greatest enemy? Sai Bao raised her eyebrows and exhaled again. She said disapprovingly, I don't want to become enemies with him for some random plan. Jiyu Yangying smiled and patted her head. Her pair of eagle eyes were still the same, piercing through the barrier of the storm and the waves, staring at the depths of the Ink Sea. Li Qingshan, at this stage, do you still think you can win? The 100 ink dragons spoke at the same time. The sea of clouds that had been torn apart closed again, condensing into an even thicker and gloomier cloud mountain. Becoming one with the entire ink sea is indeed an impressive move. If you did not ask such a stupid question, I would be even more impressed. Li Qingshan spread his arms, as if he wanted to embrace the entire sea and sky. Come. The dragon roar resounded through the sky and sea. The clouds fell, and the sea churned. It was as if the world was toppling over, wanting to crush Li Qingshan into pieces. Looking around, the 100 giant dragons charged over together. Li Qingshan leaped up, demonic energy bursting forth, battle demon possession. Dazzling saber light, a madman at the end of his road. The flow of time seemed to slow down. Every movement was so clear that it was as if it was frozen. Raising his hand, raising his eyebrows, spinning, swinging his saber. The wind blew, the tiger demon danced wildly. In a daze, Li Qingshan vanished, turning into a storm that blazed like fire, flickering with sharpness like a sharp blade. The whistling wind was like a war song, ripping apart the clouds, the sea of ink, and the colossal dragon. Ha ha, you think you can defeat me with just numbers? If you are the ink sea, then I will crush the entire ink sea. The crimson storm went on a rampage. No matter how many incarnations the Dragon King of the Sea turned into, they could do nothing to him. For a moment, a black rainstorm fell from the sky, dispersed by the storm, and the ink sea swayed. The Dragon King of the Sea was silent. Unknowingly, he had already become so powerful. Finally, it's time to decide the victor, Jiyu Yangying muttered to herself. The many dragon shadows gathered into one again, staring at the crimson storm. 1,000 years entering the painting. With the deep voice of the Dragon King of the Sea, the storm, the sea, the clouds, and the rainstorm froze in an instant. All the colors disappeared, all the sounds faded, leaving only the silence of black and white, like a magnificent painting. Chu Danqing's body was drenched by the rainstorm. His right hand grasped the weasel bristle brush tightly, staring at the churning sea, but did not descend. He was concerned about both sides, and he did not want to see either side lose. His heart was full of contradictions and conflicts. At this moment, his eyes suddenly lit up, and jade blood spurted out. He no longer had any anxiety, and only a painting was left in his heart. Li Qingshan was dazed for a moment, and found that he had returned to his human form. He looked at his right hand, which was covered in thick black ink, as if it was painted by an extremely skilled painter, vivid and lifelike. It seemed strange to use such a term to describe himself, but it did feel so. Originally, I did not want to use this move. Borrowing the power of heaven and earth, and even the 5 ultimate powers, on this ink sea is too unfair. The Dragon King of Ink Sea, or rather, Mo Wuhan, walked over. Black ripples spread out under his feet, from deep to shallow. It was extremely mysterious. His figure kept changing between a human and a dragon, but it gave off a natural feeling. However, Li Qingshan felt like he was completely isolated from heaven and earth, unable to absorb any spiritual chi of heaven and earth. He could not even feel the existence of the earth. He understood that this was the true home ground of the Dragon King of the Sea. The victor is king. What's the point of martial arts? You speak as if you have already won. Chapter 1147. Heaven and earth were silent. The sound of wind, rain, and waves all merged into the painting. What was constantly changing was the ink-colored man and dragon. Between the movements, there were long traces of ink, and the speed was extremely fast. 2 vigorous and elegant ink traces crisscrossed back and forth, sometimes joining and sometimes separating, faster and faster. In the end, they seemed to be entangled together, forming a whirlpool that spun rapidly, and the picture scroll was chaotic. Everyone was watching this shocking battle. Only Chu Danqing was focused on the painting in front of him. Blood flowed from his wrist to the tip of the brush, galloping in the painting. Green blood of vermilion, blood turned into ink. His face gradually paled, and his spirit became more vigorous with some fanaticism. He threw everything in the world to the back of his mind and only focused on the painting in front of him. Jiyu Yangying also looked back in surprise, then turned back to continue watching the battle. After an unknown period of time, there was a sudden crack. It was very soft but very clear, as if it rang in everyone's heart, breaking the silence between the sea and the sky. A figure fell from the sky and landed in the ink sea with a plop, then slowly floated up. It was Li Qingshan. His eyes were tightly shut, and he floated motionlessly on the surface of the sea. His long scarlet hair spread out, and one of his left legs and one of his right arms had disappeared. His body was riddled with wounds, but the wounds weren't filled with fresh blood, but with black ink. Jiyu Yangying heaved a sigh of relief, but it turned into a sigh. The winner has been decided. He died in battle? Sai Bao was in disbelief. Jiyu Yangying shook her head. He won. Li Qingshan suddenly opened his eyes and looked up at the sky quietly. A smile appeared on his lips. Dragon King, you lost. Before he finished speaking, there was a cacophony of cracking sounds, which turned from soft to booming, echoing throughout the ink sea. The painting gradually collapsed and fell into the sea. Color returned to heaven and earth. It was the last ray of sunset. All the spectators were in a trance. It turned out that the battle had only lasted for such a short time. Mo Wuhan suddenly appeared again, standing on the sea. He was only a few feet away from Li Qingshan's head. He looked down at him. What, do you still want to fight? Li Qingshan raised his head and stared at him. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth surged into his body, and the divine power of the earth gave him an endless source of power. The flames of the phoenix burned. He removed the black stain and healed his injuries. Even the broken limbs. Reborn in the curl of the flames. A Thousand Autumns painting is indeed an extremely powerful move, especially in this ink sea. However, you're still no match for my fist. Li Qingshan raised his new right fist in the flames. The power of vibration was indeed very good at restraining such methods. The ending flower blade made a soft sound. Yes, there's still a blade. The Dragon King of the Sea did not say a word, nor did he make a move. He was well aware of one thing. Even if he had the entire ink sea to rely on, he would not be able to crush Li Qingshan. He would only be able to hold on for a while longer and not be defeated so quickly. To put it simply, the Dragon King of the Sea's destructive power could not penetrate the tortoiseshell and cowhide to crush Li Qingshan's tiger bones and extinguish the phoenix's flames. It's very strange. You actually don't have any innate mystical powers. Li Qingshan said. Although the Dragon King of the Sea had used various methods, none of them could be considered as true innate mystical powers. To the demon race, mystical powers were the foundation of everything. If the Dragon King of the Sea had any kind of offensive mystical powers that could truly condense and release the enormous power of the ink sea, the outcome of the battle would be uncertain. However, what he found strange was that the former Qingju demon race crown prince Mo Yu, a fellow who was countless times weaker than the Dragon King of the Sea, could also use innate mystical powers. Because I am not a demon. The Dragon King of the Sea finally spoke. Oh, you turned Mo Yu from a painting into a demon, but you still can't help yourself. It's really depressing to think about it. The fellow I've always viewed as a strong enemy is actually just a painting, or rather, a painting's soul. Li Qingshan shook his head and suddenly leaped up, smashing Mo Wuhan into pieces with a punch. Ink droplets splattered all over the sky. However, regardless of whether you want to fight or not, I won't stop until I completely defeat you. Mo Wuhan's figure condensed in the distant sky again, nodding slightly at Li Qingshan. If he were to stop just like that, that would be the greatest insult. However, it was not his style to be entangled blindly, knowing that he was no match for Mo Wuhan. The dragon eyes in his eyes dispersed and became blank again. His expression suddenly became a little bleak. At this moment, Chu Danqing completed the final stroke. What he depicted was not the process of the fierce battle, but the scene of the dragon and tiger roaring at each other. The fierce battle that followed seemed to be integrated into the painting, giving people endless imagination. He revealed a pale smile, and the aura all over his body weakened to the extreme. Only then did he suddenly realize that the battle had already ended. He looked around for the Dragon King of the Sea's figure, and suddenly a voice sounded behind him. Good painting. Master. Chu Danqing turned around. The Dragon King of the Sea was looking at the painting with blank eyes, sighing in admiration. You have already obtained some of the essence of the 5 absolutes painting Tao. You can slowly cultivate it now. Master, you. Chu Danqing seemed to sense something. You've been out for so long. It's time to return. The Dragon King of the Sea faintly said. Suddenly, he waved his sleeves and the ink sea violently roiled again. A circle of coastline gradually lost its ink color and condensed towards the center of the sea. The last drop of ink rose into the sky and floated in the Dragon King of the Sea's palm. It shot into Chu Danqing's dantian, fusing into his limbs, soul, and consciousness, and surging through his blood vessels. As for the ink sea below, it turned a deep blue color. The influence of the 5 absolutes immortals' 10,000 years of existence had been eliminated, turning into a deep blue sea. After doing all this, the Dragon King of the Sea's figure dissipated with the wind. Chu Danqing stretched out his hand but only touched the warm sea breeze. At the same time, in the distant void, an ink dragon gradually appeared on a snow-white painting wall. It was vigorous and wanted to fly, but its eyes were blank. It seemed powerless and could only be trapped on the wall. 2 figures vaguely appeared. One was an azure-robed man and the other was a yellow-robed man. The yellow-robed man asked, "Fellow Daoist, why did you stop? You only drew the dragon and not the eye. That is a great loss of charm." The azure-robed man answered, "Just touching it will allow me to ascend beyond the heavens." "Forget it." "Oh, that's fine, that's fine." The yellow-robed man had a look of disbelief. Cultivators had bitterly cultivated for thousands of years. It was extremely difficult for them to ascend. How could a mere painting dare to say that they could ascend beyond the heavens? It was simply ridiculous. The azure-robed man did not seem to notice. He smiled and looked at the dragon in the painting. The sun set and the moon rose, sprinkling down clear light. Chu Danqing recalled all his experiences over the years and could not help but cry. He wiped them with his sleeves. His sleeves were stained with ink and he could not help but be stunned. "Danqing, are you all right?" Li Qingshan came over and asked with concern. He saw that Chu Danqing's entire body was pitch black. He could almost become invisible in the darkness. It was truly pitch black like ink. Even the whites of his eyes were completely black. Chu Danqing looked at his hands. He understood that the Dragon King of the Sea had used an extraordinary method to absorb all the power of the ink sea into his body. He could not help but feel even more sorrowful and cried bitterly. "Hey, don't cry. It's such a waste." Li Qingshan knew that Chu Danqing could not control this power at all, let alone digest it. "Qingshan, do you still keep your promise?" Chu Danqing wiped his tears and asked Li Qingshan. "Of course." Li Qingshan smiled. The painting tomb is about to open. Chapter 1148. The phoenix flew across the sky, heading for the ink sea. A girl holding a saber stood on the back of the phoenix, looking at the surging winds and clouds in the distance. She pointed her saber and said rudely and childishly, "Hey, hurry up. It has already begun." I know. If I wasn't afraid that you would fall, why would I fly so slowly? Don't feed me all the time. I'm your brother, after all." Li Fengyuan sped up and was also anxious to watch the battle. He muttered, "Old father is really too much. He actually didn't inform me about this." "Shut up." The tiger girl had just opened her mouth when a gust of wind blew into it. She staggered and couldn't stand steadily, so she quickly lay down. Li Fengyuan chuckled. "Little girl, let's see who's going to shut up." Suddenly, a white light descended from the sky and blocked their path. Bai Jie said with a solemn expression, "Divine bird phoenix, my king invites you to the city amongst the clouds. Go away, a good dog doesn't block the way." Li Fengyuan flapped its wings impatiently and tried to go around it. "As I said, my king has invited you to the city amongst the clouds." With a flash of light, Bai Jie blocked in front of him again. Her tone was even more unquestionable. The majestic divine bird phoenix actually has such vulgar words. Like father, like son. You want to fight? Li Fengyuan's eyes widened. It's not what I want, but I can't go against the king's order. If you insist, I can only use force. Bai Jie spread her wings and released rings of white light, displaying the extraordinary strength of a level 3 heavenly tribulation. I'd like to see what kind of tricks you have, you idiot. Li Fengyuan wasn't afraid at all. He spat out a wave of raging flames that instantly engulfed Bai Jie. A few white lights flashed, and a few light arrows pierced through the raging flames. Li Fengyuan dodged in panic. The arrow of light that passed by had left a few wounds on it, causing feathers to fall down. Bai Jie pulled the longbow in her hand, wrapped in white light, and said with disdain, even if it's a divine bird. He's just a demon commander. In her heart, however, she sighed with emotion. As expected of a phoenix. Although her arrows were mostly probing, she did not hold back. As a result, not a single arrow hit its mark. This featherman isn't easy to deal with. Ordinary demon monarchs can't compare to him. It was better to leave first. Hold on tight, ouch. Li Fengyuan hadn't even finished speaking when the tiger girl's 10 fingers shot out sharp claws and tightly clasped onto his back. But at this moment, she couldn't care less. With a phoenix cry, he spread his wings and flew high. In an instant, he turned into a beam of colorful light that shot toward the direction of Mo Hai. It was his innate ability, 1,000 Li soaring phoenix. Bai Jie put away the longbow, turned into a white light, and followed closely behind. She was surprised to find that she couldn't easily surpass Li Fengyuan. If they really escaped to the Ink Sea, it would be troublesome. With a wave of his right hand, a pure white ribbon of light shot out. The colorful light turned, and Li Fengyuan avoided it. However, he felt the weight on his back lighten, and he looked back. What, you don't want her anymore? Bai Jie grabbed the tiger girl by the nape of her neck. The tiger girl roared and bared her fangs and claws, but how could she do anything to such a powerhouse? Let her go. Li Fengyuan was furious. She's of no use to me. If you come with me, I'll be able to help you. I'll let her go. Bai Jie said with a smile. Don't listen to this slut, the tiger girl roared. How vulgar and despicable. Bai Jie frowned, and he immediately increased the strength in his hand. The tiger girl clenched her teeth, but didn't say a word. Okay, I'll go with you, Li Fengyuan said. Bai Jie waved her sleeve, and ribbons of light flew out. They tied Li Fengyuan up firmly. Let her go. If you dare to go back on your words, you'll what? Bai Jie said. I'll perish together with you. Chimph, would I lie to you? Bai Jie said disdainfully, and casually threw the tiger girl away, turning into a white light that pierced through the sky. The tiger girl adjusted her figure in midair, using all 4 limbs to fly with the wind. She ran and chased, but she could only watch the white light disappear in the east. With a roar, she turned her head and looked at the Ink Sea. However, aren't you afraid that I'll find your master's body and kill him again? Li Qingshan asked Chu Danqing with a smile. Chu Danqing was stunned for a moment, and his expression changed, but it was hard to see the change of expression on his pitch-black face. Then you better not come with me. How can I go back on my words? Li Qingshan laughed. Don't worry, this is our final battle. Chu Danqing let out a sigh. This might be the best result. Congratulations, fellow Daoist, for a complete victory. Jiyu Yangying cupped her hands and congratulated him. Sai Bao, who was beside her, looked at Li Qingshan from head to toe as if she was looking at a rare beast. Of course, Li Qingshan said. Danqing, you have to be prepared. Jiyu Yangying said sternly. Yes, I'll go cultivate now. Chu Danqing turned around and left. Li Qingshan shook his head, spread his hands, and asked, Commander Jiyu, how's my strength now? The 9 provinces are but a corner. In the past, she once said to him, the Qing province stretches for 30,000 miles, and the Jianghu is but a corner. At that time, he was just a greenhorn in the Jianghu. Now, the 9 provinces were like the Jianghu to him, and he wouldn't stay for long. I owe you something. You can tell me now. Otherwise, when I ascend, it will be all for nothing. The time is not right. This matter cannot be forced. Oh, Is this strength not enough? Li Qingshan was a little surprised. According to my experience, everything that cannot be forced is mostly because you are not strong enough. You can say that, Jiyu Yangying said. What do you want? Li Qingshan looked at her deeply. You will know when the time comes. However, if you want to ascend, go ahead. Don't worry too much about it. Jiyu Yangying opened her jade folding fan and waved it lightly. She was still as elegant as before, without the slightest hint of dependence. Li Qingshan showed admiration. This was still the Jiyu Yangying he knew. He looked around and saw a small figure running from the seaside. The figure flashed and arrived in front of the tiger girl. Why are you here? Big brother was taken away, the tiger girl said, panting. By who? Li Qingshan frowned. A white-winged slut, the tiger girl said through gritted teeth. As expected, they came with ill intentions. Are you all right? Li Qingshan patted her head. I'm fine. If it wasn't for me. The tiger girl lowered her head, tears welling up in her eyes. She looked very sad. All right, I'll save the kid. Li Qingshan scooped up the tiger girl. For once, he displayed some gentleness. Who is the white-winged slut? Jiyu Yangying suddenly asked. A winged person called by Jie. She calls herself the Ji Jinwu. Then the one who was taken away is Li Fengyuan, my son. Don't you know? You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.